Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of ELO Heaven. We've got ZywOo and myself, co-hosted, of course, and joining us today is Hawka, who is, Flashpoint 2 grand final commentator, but, don't worry, he's not too... Don't let him kid you, don't let his ego get too big. He's going to start dwarfing us all, speaking from the high heavens, talking about Yakinder winning Flashpoint 2. It's just crazy. It's surreal. I'm sure it was for you as well. And now here you are back home, finally, and ready to talk some more CS after a very short break for the New Year's. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. You see, the thing is, the crowds haven't come back in yet. So once I cast in front of the crowds, that's when the ego will just go like through the roof, But for now, we're chilling. We're chilling.
Okay, chilling. And speaking of chilling, I was just complaining to ZywOo about this. Is that if you had to talk about a certain kind of thing that gets very cold, you would say it's metal. Metal can get very cold, And you know what else is very metal? That we know what else can get very cold is the Ridge wallet. And the Ridge wallet is just something that I think, if you're going to stay cool in the new year, something you might want to look into. So here you go. He's getting it.
Ridge wallet. Yeah.
The Ridge wallet. There you go. Yeah.
Ridge.com/ZywOo CSGO. ZywOo. Fuck, I don't even know.
I don't know. Just try everything. Just try it all.
I was gonna needle Hawka. I mean, you can have an ego, but not if you got a TV out of the early 2000s. On your camera.
Hey, there's like a PlayStation 3 there as well, a fat one. I think there's a Wii in there. There's some good shit in there, man.
I didn't even notice that. You're gonna have to upgrade that setup before you can ego people.
What really gets me too is before the show went live, we were talking about what editing software we use for videos, and Hawka mentioned that he's on like Vegas 11 or 12. So he's
I still got Vegas 11.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm on Vegas 12, so like that's the thing is like for me.
I upgraded to Premiere recently, but I still use Vegas once in a while because Premiere kind of actually blows. It's actually kind of shit.
I actually hate it. Yes. I'm one of those people those weirdos.
Well, I love it, but you can't import from DxTory, which is like the best recording software, without putting all the audio into one line. So I have to like edit it and then import it. It's a huge fucking thing.
Yep. Yeah, my pipeline as well is really insane because I use like GUI, whatever you say for that. So like, I'm like encoding it through a third-party plugin that doesn't even have support properly. So like, it's a mess. That's a whole mess. Video editing software is a mess. Don't update ever. I think even my version of Premiere is like 2015 or something. So even that is outdated. But I thought it was funny that he's also rocking, in addition to Vegas 11, he's rocking the 2006 TV and the PS3 and the Wii.
Oh, and the 80s yellow jacket.
Dude, he's from a man at a time over here.
Wait till you see my phone. It's like a brick Nokia I've got right now. Oh, lovely.
It's bulletproof. That's the
of course.
And any of those Flashpoint 2 Mafia just come around. You can dodge them with your phone. All right, so we got a couple of topics here to talk about on ELO Heaven episode 3, and the first one, to get us all fired up, to get us lubricated, and get into the rest of the show, we're going to talk about the top 10 teams of 2020 according to HLTV. Guys, the only thing I have to say about this initially is why is Liquid 7? Oh, wait, hold on. I have another thing to say. Why is FaZe 10? Oh, hey, here's another one. Hey, why is Vitality 3 and not 2 or 1? And why is... Wait, where's Complexity? I think there's something missing here. Did we get a wrong list? Did we get this list like a couple months early before the rest of the results had come in, maybe? Is that what happened? Did we... I know what happened. You know how that Simple versus ZywOo debate is going on? I see what's happening here. They screwed it up. They put Navi's team, Simple's team, above ZywOo's team, but they're supposed to put Simple above ZywOo, but ZywOo's team above Simple's team. See, they just screwed it up. I'll fix that real quick. Well, while I fix that, if you guys want to talk about how you feel about this list, feel free, because this is a real doozy.
I mean, this list really feels like it was made by different people, like for different parts. Because some parts seem to prioritize winning over consistent placements, and then other places prioritize consistent placements over winning. And it just doesn't really make sense. It really feels like more than one person just jutted in, and it's like one person did top 2, one person did 3 to 5, like, and so on.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I read at the top it's just based on like who got the most points and their average points per tournament as well. So I guess they were trying to like use both of those in conjunction to make it so that you get like a decent picture for the whole year and for the peaks. But it's really weird, yeah, because like a team like I don't know, like Fnatic, they haven't done much the whole year, but they still made the list because it feels like they were just a team. Like it technically, if you really wanted to, you could say like a team that finishes like 8th place at every tournament is like the 8th best team of the year. But it just feels weird to say that when some teams have actually won tournaments and actually have done really well. So I don't know. It's a really weird list in that sense. I don't really know what they were going for. But I guess if it's just based off the points, then it kind of makes sense as to why it's weird.
The point system for HLTV always kind of confuses me anyway. I don't recall, is HLTV the one that actually has public documentation of how their point system works? Or is that...
They don't.
This is the one that is just a black box and nobody really knows what's
going on.
I
remember trying to ask about it because I used to want to do a show where I like talked about the rankings because people didn't understand them that well. And I think they're pretty secretive with their formula because they think it's like the best ranking system. So they don't really want to let it out there, I guess.
I mean, it's really tough, I guess. Like, when you look at this, you would think Furia wouldn't be below Liquid. That seems really odd because Liquid kind of got rolled most of the year. But then, like, how do you prioritize how much more important a European LAN is than a North American LAN? You know, it seems like Liquid is kind of boosted up by how well they did in the two kind of international LANs. But I don't know. If you think Europe is so much better than NA, that matters that much, then should Liquid and Furia both even be in the list? Like, it's I don't know.
Yeah, that gets me too, because I think where Liquid actually got victories, it almost like the eye test makes them matter less. It feels like if you're an analyst or just a person with like a brain as you're watching the games unfold, and correct me if I'm wrong if you guys have different opinions, but for me, I looked at the Liquid wins, especially at the Global Challenge, and thought like the teams that are losing to them, for one, it's like Furia is one of those teams, and that was a team that rolled them through the entire rest of the year, specifically that matchup. So they finally conquered that matchup, and you can say, okay, well, that's a legit win and something to be respectable. But against Big as well, it's like, okay, they win against Big and they look somewhat promising. Big is a team that's like far out of Liquid's league in general, looking at the rest of the results of the year. But then we get into the final and they just get rolled 3-0, and it's not even really close in that final for the Global Challenge. And I feel like if you are just looking at the raw numbers of where they placed in the tournament and what teams they defeated to get there, maybe that makes more sense to boost them up from a statistical standpoint. But if you look at how they lost the final, I think that tells you something that I don't know if it's possible to quantify, or if HLTV is even interested in quantifying with their team ranking.
I doubt they really look into that with anything. It's probably just a static, like, this is how they did. If you're going to try and like look at it with the eye test a little bit, that's a little bit different. I don't know. I think the biggest problem is like, how do you quantify how good NA was and how good EU was, right? Like Liquid, if you look at their placings, did really well, so many second places. But like, you know, they're playing in NA. They only play Furia and EG if they're on the other side of the bracket or something. You know, they just free second place or free top 4 at least. It's a little bit awkward. So I don't know if any list could possibly be good. Like, people are always going to be complaining about almost any list when it comes to this type of situation.
Anything about this list speak to you, Hawka, as far as something that you might think is ideal or not ideal? Anything that you look at thinking about, maybe this is the right place? Are there anything here that you think is like actually deserved? Like, for example, some people say Vitality should be first over Astralis, and obviously they're all the way down in 3. So what's your take on that? Does Astralis deserve the number 1 spot here in your mind?
It's such a weird year, man. Like, it's hard to really. It's hard for me to really put together like a decent list just in general, especially with Astralis's whole, like, look at Astralis on this article and look at how many bloody players are listed on this lineup. There's just like so many random faces. You're like, oh yeah, Yugi was here. Oh, cool. That was fun when he was in the team. Like, how do you count that period? Because it's the team, right? Like, it's the org, it's Astralis, but it didn't feel like the same team. So I don't mind putting Astralis first, just because I think when they had their actual lineup, it felt like they were pretty dominant. The Na'Vi one is also weird. I was looking at the actual placings, and so technically Na'Vi, you have the 2 first places, but one of them is the CIS tournament, which they should just win every time. And then how do you count Na'Vi doing really badly at the CIS tournaments that again, those are online, but they're playing against CIS teams that they should beat. But then some of the CIS teams were probably cheating against them. But like, there's all sorts of weird stuff in how you decide how much each tournament is weighted, I guess.
Yeah, so that's a problem I had with this is like, if Na'Vi coming consistently good in the CIS portion of these tournaments is good enough to put them second, why isn't like VP 10th, right? Like, I feel like you could justify a CIS team being in the top 10 if Na'Vi doing well in CIS is that big of a deal. If it's not a big deal because it's just CIS, then should they be second? Like, that's where it becomes a bit weird for me.
I mean, it's also that, like, for me, the fact that they finished 4th at one of them and then they finished last in one of the CIS ones. Like, to me, in my head, I'm not looking at the points or whatever, but I'm just instantly taking a lot away from Na'Vi because that's a really bad placement. That is way worse than going out last at any other tournament with actual, EU teams.
Right. Yeah, one of the reasons why I had this massive, like, negative reaction when I first looked at this list is because I've spent the last week, maybe last couple of weeks, thinking back to the teams and the games that I watched, and also thinking at the whole idea of like actually breaking down the results, analyzing the results. I'm producing this talk show at Server Time with Maui Snake. We had a whole section there where we talked about all the teams that impressed us, and being surrounded by those kinds of voices, like taking in those kinds of voices, consuming that kind of content, and getting that perspective from people who are watching the games, people who are analyzing the games live on broadcast for those games, and all of those things, they all made me think, oh, yeah, right. You can't put Na'Vi at like number 3 because of all of the disappointing results and how inconsistent they were. Maybe number 3 is actually fair, actually, considering some of the other stuff. But you certainly can't have them be like de facto number 3. There's an argument to be made. You've got to lay out your case for it. And it feels like to put them at number 2 above Vitality, who have had such a, like, you talk about a lot of second place finishes, but then also being able to finally turn it on towards the end of the year and win some trophies. That's a big deal. And that's something that, again, it feels like was not captured in the calculations, that whatever algorithm they used over in the HLTV side of things. So my only question here at this point is, like, if you're going to put Na'Vi as number 2 and put Na'Vi and Vitality as number 3, I don't know. I feel like one of the things that I have a difficulty with, and I'm not sure how deep everybody's read the article itself, the whole breakdown, but I feel like they don't really properly lay out a reason for why they're at position 3. Like, if you look at Vitality's description, there's a couple of paragraphs. I don't see Vitality number 3 as, like, I don't see an evidence for that argument. I don't see ammunition for that argument. They write like a recap of the year, and that's useful. They talk about the sixth man and all that stuff, but they don't talk about why they are not higher than they are, why they're not number 2 or number 1. I feel like you kind of have to put almost a head-to-head in that and say, like, here are the reasons for putting this team at number 3, this team at number 2, this team at number 1, or here are all of the reasons for them, and we're going to rank them based on those. It doesn't feel like that was... Maybe that was done behind the scenes, but it's not presented. You know what I mean? So that's another thing. We talked about HLTV having that score system that's proprietary. That's not actually there as something that's publicly available. We can't go and see whatever algorithm they use to put this stuff together. And that's another thing, is like there's not really much transparency in this kind of ranking. I don't know. What do you make of this, like, rankings in general, Vu? Do you think that this is even a particularly useful thing? Is it good as a talking point? It's getting us talking here, but what's your take on it?
So I think there's 2 things that they probably prioritize maybe more than we were expecting, which is, number 1, the single big LAN that we had this year. And there was, wasn't there a 2? Didn't Na'Vi go to that very
they went to the Ice
LAN?
Challenge thing. They finished second to Mouse Sports there, though. Yeah.
So I think they prioritized those LANs really heavily. And they also, I think, because you have so many events back to back to back, that I feel like it almost kind of gets... Like, if you're looking at their team ranking and you're looking through how they did through the year, if you come like last in one event and then win the very next event right when the rankings update, I feel like you kind of don't fall off as much as you could, because there's so many events. If there was, I don't know, I would have to look at exactly when it updates, but it might not even update between events. It's like, well, here's 2 events. They came last in one and they came first in the next. But I still really think that it just doesn't make sense. Like, I feel like CIS gets underrated, actually. That's one thing I wanted to say, is that I think CIS gets underrated. I think teams like VP, Gambit, Spirit, those teams were pretty scary. Like if they were in the European events, I think they'd do better than most people would expect.
Yeah, that's the problem. They probably just didn't play enough events to make the list, right? But when they played the events, they actually have pretty decent placings. Yeah, like I remember Spirit like got a couple of decent upsets when they actually made the tournament. I will say as well, I think the reason they have Vitality so low is because the start of the year for Vitality was pretty bad. Like up until June here, their best placement is 4th place at Rio, and then they have like nothing else. I think that has to be a decent part of it, because after the first few months of the year, yeah, they finish 2nd or like 3rd at basically every other tournament, right? So it just has to be the fact that they didn't play that many tournaments early in the year, but when they did, they got really bad placements. And I'm guessing they're maybe like looking at the year overall as a whole, and Vitality only really became good in the second half of the year. Before that, they basically had no really good results. That's the only reason I can think as to why Vitality wouldn't be above them.
Yeah, I mean that makes some logical sense, definitely.
But then, like, I don't care about having a ranking for the whole year as much, honestly. Yeah. Like, if you're going to that point, it's just it's a weird thing to do, because that's when the Vitality roster were transitioning away from Alex, right? So, like, obviously they're not going to be great for those first few months. That's what makes the whole thing weird, is that I think if you make a roster point at any point throughout the year, you just get punished instantly so hard for that.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is we're kind of prioritizing. I think like normal people prioritize first place finishes and like peak performance and how long you stayed at the top for, whereas like I think algorithms often favor how long you were decent for, right? So Vitality did kind of poorly in the beginning of the year, but then from July, August onwards they were a contender, right? But then you look at Na'Vi, they were a bit inconsistent, but they were always kind of up there. So like in my mind, Vitality is the better team throughout the year, even though they had a dip. And I guess the algorithm thinks differently because Na'Vi were kind of near the top for a little bit longer. I just disagree with that as like a personal way to rank a list. Like, how do you rank it? Who was better for longer, or who was the highest peak, right?
I just look at this list right now and I'm thinking, like, if it is, we're already starting to consider it almost like the product of some sort of robotic analysis of data. And maybe that's the case. Like, maybe that's actually a fair shout. But that still feels like a bad system to use to get any sort of result. Even if the end result is good, like your methodology would still be flawed if you take that route, in my opinion. So, like the other thing here I would say is, like I said earlier, I find the reasoning lacking. I find that like their paragraphs that explain stuff about the teams, it doesn't really cement in my mind. Like when I'm reading Vitality's description, I don't read it as number 3 in the world. I read them as like an elite team, but that's a subjective term that could mean a bunch of different things based on context. It's very contextual. So it doesn't read like a complete argumentation for why they are in a position. Like when I go and read Thorin's power rankings, he lays out a case a little bit more eloquently, or a little bit more like focused. Like he focuses more on what they've done. And he's also dealing with like 3 months, not the whole year. And to Hawka's point about like whether or not it's even useful to have a ranking if you're taking into account the entire year instead of where the teams are at the end, maybe another fair point to say, and this is like something you can decide if it's a bad thing about the HLTV ranking or not, is that maybe we should be thinking of this as something for the whole year. But I'm looking at this and thinking, what would, like, if this was a 10-team tournament, what would number 1 be? Who would win? Who would be second place? Who would be third place? And I'm like going down the list there. Like, that's almost how I'm thinking about it, is how would you rank these teams if these were the teams at the tournament? And, who would come out on top? And that's obviously a little bit of a different discussion in general. But in that situation, I think it's very clear that I don't think Na'Vi has a dark horse chance to win, but they're not favored. I would say they're probably number 3. Like Vitality and Astralis are probably 1 and 2. And that's just based off of like the current moment at the end of 2020. So maybe that is just a more useful metric or a more useful thing to lens to analyze the content through. But this was like obviously one of the things that was on most people's minds because it was just recently announced. And the other topic that we could bridge on from here, since we're talking about Na'Vi and Vitality and Astralis, and in theory, number 1, 2, and 3 in terms of the individual players of the year are also on all of those 3 teams. So I mean, I am curious actually if you guys have some points to make on the whole simple ZywOo debate as to who is number one, because like people are saying here, Vitality seems like they should be higher than Navi. That seems to be a general gist, especially if we're going to be taking into account what's happening right now. Like you have to really jump through hoops to figure out why Vitality is below Navi basically. And as a result of that, I also I'm curious as to how you guys feel about the simple ZywOo debate, because some people will say it's played out, some people say it's talked to death, but I think there's still some interesting conversation to be had here. And I just wanted to get your guys' take on like why specifically is simple or ZywOo number one in your guys' mind, or is it even that clear cut? Like Vu, what do you think?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think so. One of the last things I want to say about the top 10 is that I think it needed to be separated LAN and online. I think that's the biggest problem. It's in everyone's mind. It's like, here's the LAN era, here's the online era, right? So like when you're thinking about that, you're not thinking of Navi that much because you forget they won that one LAN and they came second in the other. And then the online era is just a whole different beast entirely. But about the top two, I don't know, man. It's so close.
It is very close. What was that? There was some Reddit thread that was posted today or yesterday. They killed each other 58 times each. They're tied or something in like straight up 1v1 duels. Kind of like a throwaway statistic, but it's like a nice additional ammunition for an argument that they're like dead on even.
I mean, I'd guess Simple wins it because they came first on LAN, and they're the higher ranked team. I don't know if I want to give it to Simple. It's tough to say. It's really tough to say. If I had to lean towards it, I might say ZywOo. If I had to choose, I might say ZywOo.
What's your take, Hawka?
Yeah, the conflict in my brain is that I think Simple is probably the better player for raising a team's skill floor. Like, if you want to just put him on any random team and just make them actually able to win tournaments, I think he's the best at that. But just because Vitality have actually got a better setup, it's made it so that ZywOo probably has more consistency across the year and across tournaments, which I think just helps him a lot. And then it's a question of, do I care more about the fact that Simple can sometimes go really huge, but is like less consistently able to do it because I feel like his teammates just aren't as good and the calling just isn't as good? Like in theory, that means in my head, I feel like I have to say Simple. But then when I actually watch the games, I would probably say ZywOo I would edge it to just based on his consistency more for the entire year. At least that's how I felt watching it. Because I just feel like in the actual games in this year, ZywOo has been able to win more, right? And like I have to put that into my head as part of why I kind of account for the team or the player who's going to get the win. So I think I'd just edge it to ZywOo, but honestly, like I don't care. You can just flip a coin any given day, really.
People kind of underrate. I mean, does Navi really have a worse individual like player to player roster than
I think for
Vitality?
Me it's just the calling is a fair bit
Yeah,
worse.
I think the calling's a big one. Like I agree with that 100%. I feel like Navi, if you look at it man to man, probably has a better roster, like individually, I feel like, because Electronic, you just can't match him for Vitality. There's nobody to match Electronic. And I actually feel like, you know, watching a few games from Navi, that's kind of actually, it's their blessing and their curse is that they have Electronic and Simple who are both aggressive and both will make openings. And so then you have guys on the team like Perfecto that are just like, don't fuck it up. Don't fuck it up. I need to not die and fuck this up. Right. Whereas like with Vitality, they've got a better system structure, better calling. And so it's like, all right, we're just going to create space for ZywOo and he's going to get things done. And so like on Navi, I feel like you have a level of scaredness coming out of some players to make mistakes that causes them to actually do worse because they've got two great players instead of just one.
The thing about the simple ZywOo debate for me is like, I look at ZywOo on his team, and to your point, Vu, I'd actually think that people do assume that ZywOo's team is better just because they've won, and like they think that's since the narrative seems to be that Simple and ZywOo are very, very close in terms of individual, like who was the most valuable player of 2020. When we're looking at it from that angle, and because these players are running up so close to each other, if they're top 1 and 2, and one team is finding much more success more recently than the other, then the assessment that you could make is, well, obviously the team that's finding success has the better core, or has the better team play or calling, or, you know, whatever external factor. I don't think that the firepower is as lopsided as people might make it out to be, because I do think that when Electronic decides to go off, as if, again, I'm saying that flippantly, as if he can just flip he's like, today I guess we'll win a trophy, whatever. But for the most part, it's, it seems, like Hawka was saying there, his team just doesn't have the calling maybe. Obviously, Electronic himself is a player that we've seen go up and down, sort of like Flamey, actually. It's weird how that seems to happen with Na'Vi, is like whoever their second star is, obviously for a while it was Flamey and then it became Electronic. Maybe this is also just something that I'm broad strokes taking away, and maybe it doesn't actually bear out when you look at it. But Electronic seems to not be very consistent as like the star second fragger or the second star for the team. Like, he's consistently the player who's most set up for that, but I'm not sure if he consistently delivers in that role. Maybe more often than not, but it does feel like when he has a stinker, it's very noticeable. So you contrast that to Vitality, and again, this might also be recency bias, but it feels like, RPK can even wake up and start mowing people down, especially on the CT side. We have obviously Shocks, who can activate it pretty much any time as well. It almost in like a similar way to Electronic, where it's like sometimes he might just take over the game himself and leave very little space for anybody else. Nivera has been a bit of a revelation. Masuda came into his own and pretended the whole world was a frag movie for a while. Like, you point to individual players on this roster, and you can see where they can all take a step forward and like really become a secondary star. And maybe you still have to gamble that one of them will in order to make sure that you win the round or win the map. But that's a much better chance if you're looking at 4 other players or 3 other players realistically that might end up coming out into their own, compared to Na'Vi, who really are relying on Simple and then one other player like Electronic probably, or maybe Flamey. So can we speak to the surrounding supporting staff for these players? Like, what would you guys say are like the strengths and weaknesses, the critical strengths and weaknesses for either one of these teams?
I mean, I think looking at the like the tournaments these two teams won, you kind of get a decent idea of that. Like, Katowice for Na'Vi was one of the most absurd runs you will ever see, where it felt like pretty much every player was peaking. Maybe Electronic wasn't as good as he could have been, but like Perfecto was ridiculous with clutches. Yes. You see that when those players actually do hit their peak on the sort of up and down level of play they can reach, like I think that's probably like the one run this year where I don't know if any team could have beaten that. Like, just watching what you were seeing, the way they just somehow managed to win every round, Simple just winning stupid rounds like every time. It was just ridiculous. Like, watching them be able to do that, you see why the team can play well. But then you just look at Vitality when they win tournaments, and it never feels like, numbers wise, many of the other players are going massive, but they just have their impact rounds. They just need 1 or 2 impact rounds in a map, and they're probably going to win. So it just goes back to that for me. I think this Na'Vi team it's just so it's so annoying, because I just want Simple to get a decent caller who can add some consistency to the roster, I guess, because I just never feel like I know what I'm going to get with Na'Vi, right? I just never know if they're going to actually show up, and that's so annoying because Simple's so good. Yeah,
I think the trouble with Na'Vi is that they're shit. Except for when everyone goes off, which is like any team can win when your whole team is sick. Like, oh look, everybody's hitting people in the head today. Like, I guess we won the game. I don't know. I'm sure they suffer a little bit from playing so many CIS teams, because CIS teams have very clear styles, a lot of them at least. So I'm sure they suffer at least a bit from that. I would like to see how they would perform this year if they were playing more European teams, if they got more practice against Danish teams, rather than just, a couple of tournaments here and there, outside of like CIS stuff. But yeah, I still think there's some element to it that they've got 2 star players, and when the games get down to the line, a lot of the time you see them making plays to make moves themselves from Electronic and Simple, and I think that kind of throws a wrench in the strategic workings. Whereas you look at Vitality, and they're playing their game plan. They got a game plan, they're playing it up until they win or lose. I feel like that's just a better way to have a more consistent team and a team that's going to do well long term.
when I'm looking at the grand strategy that Navi seems to implement, I'm seeing some stuff that definitely feels different and distinct from the Zeus era of calling. But we had this conversation on the first episode of this talk show, and Vu and I came to somewhat similar agreement that like it doesn't really seem that Boomich is like the legendary revelation caller that he was sort of made out to be by Blade and by maybe even tacitly by Zeus as well. So since you've been talking about Navi's calling, Hawk, I'm interested in your take on this sort of discussion as a bit of a continuation from the last time we talked about it on the show. What's your sort of take on Boomich? And can we even really levy blame or responsibility at Boomich given the online nature of these games? Do we think that maybe it's Blade's fault? Like, what's your read on the Navi calling?
I think one of the things that really worries me about having Boomich as a caller is just how inconsistent he can be individually. He can have really, really good games at times. Like he's had games where he has actually carried and done like 30 bombs, and he'll do that very occasionally. But he plays just very aggressive himself naturally, and sometimes has really bad games as well. And I always wonder if that is going to affect the mentality of you as a caller. I just think it inherently will to some extent, especially because he's so young and inexperienced. I don't see how that can, not be a factor. I also just wonder, like, as an inexperienced player, how is he even going to really get the ropes on this team and feel like he has full control of it, right? There are very few people that I think can do that. I think Alexi B is one of the few. We've seen him come into ENCE, come into OG and do it. I just don't think he comes across as someone who has that real natural leader mentality. But I also don't think that the CIS players necessarily want to play an EU style. I don't know if you asked Simple, like, would he want to play an EU style? Would Electronic want to play a more EU style, like a Danish team? He probably doesn't want to go like full Astralis, right? But I would love for an in-game leader who could come in and just add a little bit more, like just pull them in that direction slightly more to give them a bit more consistency. Because I just think Boomich, too many times, when I'm watching the game, I just feel like there's a little bit of indecisiveness there. I just don't feel like he always makes the call quite quickly enough. And that always seems to be one of the issues I just feel like they have as a team.
Vu, why should Navi pick up Shiro? Oh, sorry. What were you going to say?
Why should they pick up Shiro? I was going to question, what's Blade been doing? I mean, he was brought in. He's supposed to be like this tactical guy, right? He's supposed to be, someone that brought up Simple in Flipside Tactics, or hell, was it? I think it was Flipside Tactics, right?
So.
He was supposed to be the guy, and it feels like Navi's not all that much different. I'd have to do like a really in-depth look to know, but it doesn't feel like there's been that much difference, and it feels like they're not really picking up the things that you were kind of expecting Blade to put into their style a little bit more. They're still kind of doing their thing, and I'm not sure what's going on there. And you're right. Like, I don't think they would want to play a European style. Maybe they would want to play whatever style would win, but it's tough to really say that when you're playing CIS. You've got a style already. And like, I think Zeus was good for Navi because he was like legendary enough. You could bring him in and he could just say what he wanted to do and just do it. I don't think there's any other IGL in CIS that could do that. There's no one with that pedigree. Like, Jerry is the best thing you got. I mean, you got Jane, but obviously not. Jerry's like the best thing you could get, but he's still not, he's not going to come in and tell Simple what to do necessarily if he says he wants to run out T-Con this round.
It's just a tough team to tame, or a tough player to tame, really. It's like, on the one hand, even if you're a really good IGL, how do you know that how do you have the confidence to say, no, Simple, do this instead? Like, come on, man, that's Simple. It's like top one player forever or whatever.
For sure. I remember, I think it was Moses who said this on a Counterpoints or something at one point, where he just said he doesn't think Blade's style meshes with the Na'Vi team. And the more I think about it, the more I think that can kind of be true. Because I'd have to go back and actually watch Blade when he was in-game leading. But from what I remember, it was a lot of set pieces. Like, almost all the rounds, I feel like, were set pieces to make up for the fact that he didn't have good players. And I don't know if
World that it isn't a top 3 player.
Hey man, he had that one sick what was it, that train performance against Sean Gares? Remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Banger.
He's a top 3 player named after a Blizzard program, so he's got that going for him. That's about it.
Or a Minecraft program, depending.
Sure.
Depending on if you're a zoomer or a boomer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just if that were true, if Blade was like really reliant on set pieces, I just don't think that's that conducive to the way Counter-Strike's played now. I think it's a lot more free flowing now, and you just don't see as many you don't see as many rounds where I feel like the team's coming into it and they're like, we're going into this round, we're doing this specific set play 100%. It just feels a lot more dynamic nowadays, and maybe Blade just can't adapt to that. I don't know.
Well, that is another point that Vu brought up in the first episode of this talk show, was that online you just get read. Like, people just look at your stuff. So like, it's impossible to keep that stuff a secret too. So even if Blade is trying to adapt to stuff, right, like, it's very, very difficult to keep that under wraps long enough for it to be like successful long term. That's like you have to enter into this period of non-stop innovation, basically, is what it seems like, if you really want your strats to still be accurate or useful in like a month or a week or for the next tournament, which is basically like 48 hours after the previous one. So
yeah, I mean, a free flowing style is kind of what you're looking at, what you're hoping for. If you look at set strats, like the most, I don't know, this isn't something people look at, but like what's the most common set strat in CS right now is probably the arch trap. Like, and every team runs it. What team doesn't run like on Inferno that the arch trap rush with like a molly truck and, you know, a couple flashes over? Every team runs that. Like, who even started that? Who the fuck knows? Like, every team just picked it up and they all just run it. So you can't have like that advantage that you could maybe in like, you know, the early 2010s, you could have that where you run a set strat and other teams don't run it. I look back at some of the original majors, and Very Games was running that full B exec on Inferno, the triple molly, flashes over, smokes over, like, can't hold the site B exec. And no team adopted it for like a couple of events or a couple majors. I think it was like 2 majors later that a bunch of other teams picked it up. And it's, you know, you've got that advantage if you come up with a cool thing. But you know, nowadays it's like Kerrigan comes up with the smoking banana that lands on the wall.
Yeah.
He bounced off half wall. What, like 2 months later, every team runs that. You know, like it's just every team's just stealing anything you come up with.
Yeah, it's a big deal too, because Kerrigan's like been the sort of godfather of finding creative uses for grenades anyway. Well, I can think of 2 examples. It's like the banana half wall one that you just mentioned, Vu, and then obviously you save your smoke for B and just throw a frag to outside of dust too. So that's like a case where he's kind of notorious for that, and eventually people start picking it up. Now eventually is shortened again, like very, very short period of time where it's just yours, and eventually becomes everybody's. And that's probably something that's just going to continue happening. Like, more teams are picking up analysts. Like, Twitch chat was just telling me about how Navi actually has an analyst now. And like, that's a case where like everybody, all these teams are going to be having analysts scouting stuff. We had Mahone on for one of the things on the other, one of the other shows that I did. And he was talking about like how he has to essentially do a mix of anti-stratting and also like figuring out what other teams would be anti-stratting their team for Ninjas in Pajamas. So he's almost have to, like, you know, like nested, like Inception level anti-strat himself, so that he can figure out what he thinks the other teams are going to be doing. So like, that's stuff that I think is just going to become more common as time goes on.
It also just doesn't help that, I mean, we can get into these same old discussions as much as we want, but the 2 things that really strike out to me are the map pool just doesn't change. So no one's making new stuff for new maps or anything like that. Like, what if your attention was suddenly drawn to a new map that you have to learn? Then maybe if you come up with something creative on another map, maybe there's a chance that other teams don't look into it as quickly. Like, that could actually be helpful, but that's not going to be a thing. And then, what was my other point? Oh, no, I don't remember it. This is bad.
No,
this
that's
is
okay.
bad.
You know what happened?
You know when you open your mouth and your brain is just like, no.
What really happened?
To the set plays thing, or the free flowing thing.
The free flowing.
I don't think it was about that.
No, that's okay. It'll come back to you.
Oh no, it was that, like, if we had a circuit which actually like built up to a major or something, then you could maybe actually come up with new stuff and have it and save it for the big tournaments, which would be cool, right?
Saving strats for the major.
Save Vertigo for the major. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Like, every team now, they've got like 6 analysts, 3 coaches. Like, they got their social media managers like getting in on that. Like, they're all watching one map everything.
Hacker? Oh, you said coaches. Sorry.
They got, like, I've heard players complaining like every team wants their coach and their analyst and like their assistant coach joining the server, analyzing everything. And I've heard rumor that there's programs being made to combine all 5 demos. So if all 5 players have their POV demo and they put it together in like a program, it will give you all the information they have on their client, which is like, wall hacks basically. So you'll have like 5 bubbles running around the map that knows where your opponents are. I don't know if any teams have that, but I heard that type of thing was being developed, like in active development, which would be pretty fucked, like for scrims against good teams. And then you got the other problem that every good team is playing every other good team. Who does Na'Vi practice? I guess they practice European teams. NA especially, they're all playing each other all the time, right? So you're really just like, your practice is kind of, I guess, a little bit limited in that you're mostly kind of like matches are in your region. It gets a little bit awkward, I think.
I just think that one of the things that, again, if we circle back very briefly to that top 10 teams article, one of the other things that I think is really important about what Vu said about segregating, delineating the idea of LAN and online is online had so many asterisks. It already has asterisks of like, oh, you're online, so you're feeling more comfy and your mom can bring you some hot tea and like whatever. But on top of that, you have the cheating scandals. You have the stream sniping allegations. You have like all this other stuff that calls into question the competitive integrity of online CS. Nobody's going to feel good about that. Like we want to forget 2020's online results as soon as possible, particularly if you're a player on a team that like may have gotten cheated against, right? And it's just the uncertainty will actually, I think, cripple a lot of people in terms of their motivation to continue onward in that kind of environment. So hopefully that stuff gets resolved. I actually want to segue a little bit into talking about this reported, there's more cheating bugs now. There's ESIC's gonna, fuck some shit up for a lot more people, allegedly. So like, apparently, I don't know if it's going to be the same coaches that were on the 37 list already that are just going to get more bans added to their list, but, or if it's going to be some new faces, some fresh faces for the meat grinder. But this is going to be something that could even further destabilize the public perception of online CS. And since we have to do it for the foreseeable future, for hopefully not a very long future, since we are going to not have too many studio events, like I think Katowice this year is going to be a studio event with no crowd, similar to what it was last year. So I guess up until then, we're still going to be rocking online, and online's probably going to be a little while anyway. I don't know, man. I feel like if we get more stuff out of ESIC, and it's a good thing that they should do, like I'm not saying they shouldn't do it, but if that does come out and there's even more coaches or teams or whatever implicated, particularly since, like we talked about in the last episode, Heroic are being heroic by keeping Hunden around. Like there's a lot of teams out there that are not actually dealing with the rot, the cultural rot that we would call it. That means that there's going to be a lot of pent-up frustration. Am I overblowing it? What do you guys think about if you had to shadowbox what players would be thinking about in this situation? At some point, you just got to get fed up and say, like, enough is enough. These guys cheated, and they're still like keeping their jobs, and there's even more cheaters now. And what's happening? So anybody can take this one because this might be a doozy. I don't know.
It's a big one to unpack, man. It's a big one.
Bro, I don't want to touch this. I don't want to touch this.
Yeah, I mean, if you were around in like the early, or I guess like the late 2000s, early 2010s, playing like 1.6 and Source, like there were a lot of people, like being an onliner was like a real thing. It's like, and it's like it's not how it is now where it's like, oh, he's an onliner, as in like, he maybe, but like, probably he just doesn't do all the pressure. It was just like, there were players that everyone thought cheated online. And then stuff was coming out like years old, like ambient occlusion, and like the ways to get rid of flashes. And then you had the thing with the bugged molly, because if you joined a custom server, it wouldn't change, and like all this other shit that just takes years to come out. And it's ridiculous. And the fact that nobody's blowing the whistle on this shit for years, like the fact the coaching bug, the scary thing is like if the coaching bug was like for 6 months, a year, a couple of teams knew about it and it got blown up, that's one thing. But the fact that this is around 3-4 years coaching bug, every team using it apparently, like every team knew about it seemingly, and then it finally gets blown up. That means there has to be stuff out there that like a lot of teams are probably using that is a cheat, and it's not making anyone happy. I mean, even if you assume nobody's cheating, even if you like have 100% knowledge that they're not cheating, people still write off online results. You know, it's still a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, dude, I almost want to like, how do I phrase this? My brain is slow right now. God damn. Yeah, like with the coaching bug stuff. I almost feel like we're somewhat fortunate in a sense because someone could have just abused it in literally every game. If they really wanted to, they could have abused this in like every game for the past few years. Imagine that, man. Like if a team literally came out and yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it honestly could have been way worse. Is the thing that's kind of funny about the coaching bug, and obviously there's also the shit about just apparently almost every team is just stream sniping, which is cool. You know, sick, very very nice. I don't know. It's hard. I think just when people are at home, it's really difficult to get them in that headspace where they're going to feel like they're actually threatened and they're actually going to feel like there's a chance they're going to get caught almost, right? Like when you're at home, it's just so much easier to just say, you know, I'm just gonna throw on the stream right now and have a little look at the money. No one will ever know, right? It's just way too easy, and obviously everything's going to be taken with a pinch of salt because of that.
You're right. You know, one of the things that Vu said earlier is that like so many teams were using it, so many coaches. Oh, hey, Vu, you were a coach for a while.
Actually, it's funny because when the glitch got from my understanding, the reason the glitch became public wasn't really because someone ratted it out. It's because there was a week or two where you would just glitch every time someone died. Like when I was coaching, every time, not every time, but a large percentage of the time someone would die, I would just be suspended in the air over where they were, right? Like just for the next however long, the next round, I think, unless I clicked off of them. And fucking right, I used that to like figure out what was going on in scrims. Like it's a scrim. I wanted to see how our strats were working on their rotations, right? I was like looking above inner on train. It was like, is our fake working, right? I mean, I'm gonna use that information in a scrim. Fuck it, you know.
It's weird.
I'm not gonna use it in a match, right? Like I've got some integrity, but you know,
some integrity, which apparently is good enough to be one of the best coaches in the scene right now. So there you go. It is weird though as well, just because it can be a bug that just happens to you. Which, like, at least it's not premeditated is the other thing, right? Which is why it was kind of nice that some coaches literally just used it once, and then you're just like, okay, we can at least give you some leeway. You weren't just, you know, trying to look out for this and try and use it all the time, right?
Yeah. No, I think that thankfully that subject, the thing is, I thought that the coaching thing was, okay, it's a painful memory. We got to learn from it, but we can move on from it. And then when ESIC said that there's additional coaching bugs that they are investigating with a frightening amount of, I forget the verbiage in DK's article, but something to the effect of like a high propensity to be abused. Like it's easy to do. And maybe there's a lot of evidence of it happening. Like, depending on the severity of it, maybe it's not as severe as literally wall hacking over a certain area or something like that. I don't know what the actual bug is in this case, but that is that's a doozy. That's something that could really screw over a lot of people, particularly those who think they may have gotten away with it. Which is the other thing too, is like imagine the relief if you're like. Well, I was going to say Starix, but obviously he was later exposed. But the indignation or whatever, like people coming out and like, ha, cheater. I despise cheaters. All my homies hate cheaters. And then it comes out like they're on the list. We're like, well, I have nothing to say. I don't remember doing it. But like, if that's the case, like you think you got away with it because you used a different cheating bug and exploited in a different way. Well, apparently E6 got your number too. So, I mean, in a way it's good because it gets, you know, all of the problems out there and then we can deal with it. But I want
to say one more thing about the coaching bug is, I hope there was a differentiation between people that intentionally got into the coaching bug and like the glitch that I'm talking about where you just kind of end up in it for a round or two or whatever. Because I feel like there is a clear difference. Like if you join the server first to intentionally get into it and then you move it around, because apparently you could move it around if you got into it the right way. Like if those people are getting punished the same way as someone that like got into it accidentally and like couldn't get out of it or whatever, that's like kind of unfortunate, at least in like a morality standpoint. Maybe they should be punished the same because you can't really deal with it the same. But like, I feel like there's something different between the two, you know? I don't know if you guys agree with that. I do feel like there's a difference.
Yeah, I think I do. I remember, I think it was Roban from FaZe who got caught up in it, and then it was in a game that they lost 16-0 or something, and he never moved because he didn't want to use it or whatever. So
he said he walked away from the screen or something. But,
yeah, it definitely is, especially if the bug happens to you for the first time when you're in a game. That's when it's like, I can't really blame you at that point. Personally, I don't think I can blame you much, because for all you know, that like, if it's just a bug that you think is happening in the game, it's really hard in that moment. Like you can't come into it having thought with a clear mind. It's like, if a bug happens where I randomly float above the map, what will I do? Let me break down the morality of this decision. You're just going to be like, oh shit, I've got free information, boys. Let's go. Like I can see why people would make that decision in the moment for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things where it's like forgivable. You know, that's a redeemable moment. I still think like it's when I first got this bug like one round in a scrim, I was like, this is not supposed to happen, right? I'm like, this is kind of bullshit. And if it was like an important moment, or like, I very specifically, I remember when I got it the first time, I was like, I can't see anything. like this is bad information or whatever. Like I didn't call anything for my team because I knew it was just like bullshit. Like that was just my initial reaction. I can understand people not initially reacting that way, I can definitely see it like someone using it for a round or two the first time they get it. It's still so obviously bogus though. Like there's nobody sitting there like, wow, this is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It just feels wrong,
Yeah.
And so like, even when I like got into that accidentally, it was like, I'm not going to tell my team what's going on, but I'm still like, I still used it, in a scrim to like figure out how our strats were working for my own information. I guess that's some level of cheating in its own. It's only advanced teams, so nobody really cares. But I mean, that's the other problem with the coach bug that has been mentioned by a couple of people, is like, you never know what coach has been running this in scrim after scrim after scrim, and just getting information and writing down info of other teams that they don't know they have, of like the way they're playing and their tendencies and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think some leniency on a first time basis is, understandable. I still think it's, punishable, but I feel like people, I hate it that everyone on Reddit is like, oh, we used it for a round. If this was me, I would have immediately moved out of it. And it's like, motherfucker, you don't know that until you're in that situation. And to pretend otherwise is some straight bullshit. Like, once you have to be in that spot, it happens. And in a millisecond, you have to say, this is good or this is bad. I'm going to use this or I'm not. I'm going to leave the server, whatever. You don't know if you're going to react like that until you've been there,
Yeah, you might still be watching the kill feed too, or something. Like you might still be looking at the minimap. Like obviously you're going to see that it's screwed up. I imagine, again, I haven't actually seen what it looks like from the first person view, but like the idea of you immediately recognizing what it is the first time you've had it, especially before it gets leaked or before it gets discussed. There's a lot of bugs in CSGO, and this one was just one too far. I don't know. I haven't seen too many people take Valve to task for this. Is something I've tried to do when I'm talking to people about it. But like, I can't believe that they had such a half-assed implementation of the coach feature anyway. Because if you go all the way back to when coaches were even allowed for, like, that's something that has no bearing on the casual game. That has no it's not behooving Valve at all to add that. It's just for the professional play. So the idea that they would just be like, well, we don't really care. So here's this like bugged up, junk that apparently has just been broken for 5 years. So
well, Valve doesn't play the game. That's what we learned when they put the R8 in the game, is they don't fucking play CS. Like they don't know.
Yeah, they get done with the CS update. They go home and they crank up some Dota, baby. They're having a good time,
Of course, yeah. They start planning out the circuit. Like, here's how all the teams are going to go into the international, and here's everything that we're going to do for the balancing. And then, like, meanwhile,
the funniest thing about this coach bug, just from an anecdotal experience, is like, I made a server for our team because our old server was fucked up. Like, so for the team I was coaching, I set up the server and everything. I got it all perfect. Right. And then we had like a bunch of problems. Like the server had like these weird lag spikes. And at some point, like the guy that was signing the paychecks was like, let's just get another server. And it's like, dude, I just spent the whole weekend. Fuck it. I've never set up a server before. And then the next day I start getting this coach bug and I'm like, oh shit, the server's completely fucked. The first couple times I had no idea. I was like, the server's fucked. Like, let's just pretend this didn't happen. I'm not telling anybody. Like, I'm scared. I fucked up the server. It was fucking great. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, no wonder they always invite us to ZywOo's server, and he's just up in the sky over there.
No, well, actually, like one of the things about like lower level teams, the Valens thing about GOTV's demos, I kind of agree with that. Like when we were scrimming, we would, we'd tell people, hey, we want GOTV demos, we want to get the info, and it's shitty because you can counter strat, you can anti strat. It's kind of bullshit in that way. But like it is so big for improving your own gameplay. Just like having the GOTV demo, knowing the mistakes you're making, like going over it with your team. It's huge to have that, and it's like so much tougher to coach when you don't have that. I wish more teams did that a little bit more often.
Yeah, you wish more teams were like ForZe, is what you're saying. Yes, no?
No comment?
No comment? At least get the permission of the other team.
Well, I mean, obviously, you need to get the permission clearly, right? Like you need to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think like especially at the lower levels, teams just don't really care that much. Like some teams do, a lot of teams just don't give a fuck. But once you get to the MDL level, nobody really wants to do it, which I think is kind of a detriment to both teams to some extent. The only problem is like, again, it creates more work for yourself because now you've got an extra demo you have to look at and add into your anti-stratting, or like you have to think about that, or it is extra work, but I think it's valuable work.
Well, that is a good point anyway, though. I think that one of the other things that's really weird to me is I understand why, but an example of where esports, or at least CS esports, is like lagging behind some of the other esports and some of the other, obviously, like professional sports that we see from the real life realm is, one of the things that I always look at is the pro players who are like, don't release our comms, like don't leak our strats. And like, I totally get that, like why they would be protective of it. But people mic up like the football players, the American football players all the time, and they're calling strats. And I think that's actually really useful for like the average fan of the team to see, like, if they recognize that play, or if the commentator can say like they're calling a play that they made like at a desperate moment in the last game, and like it can help sort of drive narratives, it can help set the stakes, and it's really useful for a broadcast. I think the way that it levels up other aspects of the sport, while obviously making it more challenging for teams, which is something you have to figure out how to balance, is worthwhile. And I think kind of the same thing can be said for leveling up the individual teams, like what ZywOo argued for with the GOTV demos, is if that was just like, basically if we couldn't control it, if we didn't have a way to stop GOTV demos from being recorded, or to find out if somebody else was, if everybody was doing it, or if it automatically got saved as a replay file, or whatever the case may have been, then in such situations, I think you would actually see a higher level of play, and teams would figure it out. Like, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It wouldn't be a cataclysmic event.
Here's the biggest problem. Is that everyone's a fucking cheater.
Okay.
Like, because if you want to, like, if one team wants to record GOTV demos with another team, and both teams are fine with it, and they know each other, that can work, right? That's why like an academy team is valuable, I think, because you can trust that academy team isn't leaking it. But everyone's a fucking cheater. So if you record a GOTV demo, it's not that you're recording it against this team that you're not going to play against. Your MDL team recording it against a pro team, or an MDL team versus an advanced team, whatever. It's that team is very likely to leak it. And so then you either don't record the demo, or you yourself have to be like, if everyone's recording demos, have to go around and get other people's demos, or at least that's what people are going to think, because they're going to be like, well, all of our demos are getting leaked anyways. This is some bullshit. Let's get everyone else's demos. And then it's going to be the same shit with the coaching bug. If like all scrim demos were like automatically recorded somehow, it would just be everyone sharing everyone, because they all expect everyone else is cheating.
Yeah, I don't know. In that case, just start storing them in the cloud and let average people like me go download your scrims, man. Fuck it, like just do it, man. Like, again, I don't think it would be like you do raise a legitimate point, but I don't think it would be this cataclysmic event where like pro teams just implode upon themselves because there's more film. I think it would actually encourage teams to actually try new stuff out, not recklessly, and like I'm trying stuff out by like running backwards and Zeusing you. I mean, like actually
Have
trying.
you seen any MDL
stuff.
scrims? That's really what happens.
So I'm just saying, I think it would encourage teams to be a little bit more creative as well, which is something that we could also use, especially in the online era where there was tournaments nonstop and the same teams were playing each other. Like maybe that also turned some heads. I don't know. It's all shadow boxing. None of that would ever end up happening in the pro scene. It seems like, or at least if it does happen, it'll be a long time from now. But
yeah, I think on the team comp stuff as well and stuff like that, the thing we will really need is for one company to just be like dominant in CSGO, because that's what all those sports have, right? Where it's basically just, if you want to go pro in basketball or whatever, you probably go to the NBA because they're the biggest league, and then you don't really care that, you know, comms or whatever are getting out there. Although I will say, I was watching Maui's, you know, streams recently where he's been going back and watching some old games. And dude, in some of those games, they actually just mid-game go into the team comms and they're like, let's listen to what Fnatic are saying right now. And I was just like, holy shit, that could go so wrong, bro. Some of the players are going to be saying some questionable stuff at times, you know. I would not do that.
Well, back in like 2014 and stuff too, like we didn't have any media training. We didn't have any sensitivity training on the internet. No, it was still vestiges of the Wild West, which Vu can attest to is still going on sometimes in some other places. But for the most part, on the pros level, it seems to have been resolved. # be heroic. So what do you think of this?
Yeah, going into a team's comms mid-game. I mean, the thing is, like, even a standard team comm in the middle of a game is like, these guys are fucking dog shit. They're terrible. Like, I can't believe. And then then that actually like somehow like players are simultaneously the biggest shit talkers and the biggest, most fragile fucking children of all time. Because if they go in and hear that, they're gonna be like, this fucking shitter, he's calling me dog shit in the middle of a game. Like, I fucking hate this guy. Like
he did the same thing like 5 minutes earlier in his own team.
Yeah, the dichotomy there is very odd. The dichotomy there just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Going in mid game, that is odd. That is like risky. I think the biggest problem is not even that it's just a one league thing. I think it's, well, at least the excuse everyone uses is, oh, they're speaking a different language. And so then you have the other, like, the kind of, it's almost like fear of missing out. It's like, oh, they're probably getting someone to translate our shit, so we got to get someone to translate their shit, you know, like, so it's like this issue where, like, Navi's going to assume Astralis is translating all their comms. And so they're going to want to translate all their comms. And Astralis is assuming that Navi is translating all their comms. So they're going, you know, it just becomes this huge fucking rabbit hole, you know?
That's true. And also, I will say, having had the chance to listen to some comms at Flashpoint, we barely obviously listened to some of the teams because they're speaking, you know, Russian or whatever. We just didn't. So even from that broadcast perspective, if someone's having really shit comms, I'm not going to be able to say that if they're a Russian player. You just normally listen in for like a round or two and you get the vibe of that team. Maybe that's all you'll do. And sometimes when we hear the Na'Vi comms, we can hear that it sounds like a clusterfuck, right? You can pick that up at least, but that's about it.
Yeah, you mean James and Yakinder are not speaking in English? Fuck out of here with that fake news.
Sadly not.
One of the things
I wish we'd have tuned in and Yakinder would have like said something like to Maui, just secretly. It could have been like, Maui, I know you're listening to this. Don't worry, I'm doing this for you, Maui.
Yeah, and then he runs out and you think he's going to do an epic move, but he just gets Zeused because it's MDL actually.
Dies.
So
he says before the round, I'm channeling my inner Maui snake for this round, and
there you go.
It just goes wrong.
One of the things that speaking of channeling your inner Maui snake, I actually have no segue for this one. I wanted to talk about Kassad out of C9 because this is another really confusing thing. I was going to say earlier, speaking of things that don't make sense, but that time is long gone. So this is something that to me doesn't make any sense. And I figure we can, there's going to be a couple of roster moves that we discuss here. This is definitely one of them. I was actually going to talk about Fall into Liquid first, but this one seems way more what happened, you know? So
you can say, like you said before, like pre-show, Pronogo was saying that he thinks this is going to be a long one, but this might not be a long one because if the answer from all three of us is what the fuck happened, we don't know.
Pretty much it.
Okay, I have some thoughts on this. I think some other people have pointed this out as well, is that Alex and Kassad both come across as people who very much want control, a lot of control in a team. So I think if that's not meshing for whatever reason, you're probably going to have some difficulties. And just looking at the way that 100 Thieves played, I think it is different to what Cloud9 maybe want to do, right? I think that's the biggest thing for me is that I wish that Kassad could have tried to work it out and maybe adapt his own coaching style to this team, but it doesn't seem like it's going to work out that way. And he might just go back to something which is maybe more comfortable if he goes back to that X 100 Thieves core. But I would have loved to have seen if he could have maybe tried to adapt a little bit to Alex, and Alex could adapt a little bit to him. I would have loved to seen how that would have worked. But it might just be a case where they are both very, very certain of the way they want to play the game, and maybe that just doesn't mesh. I can see that being the case.
It's odd to me because, when I think about Kassad, I don't really think about an in-game heavy coach. I see him as more of like a, kind of like a mesh guy, out of game stuff where, because, even 100 Thieves said after he left, we didn't do demo reviews with Kassad, right? Like it felt like he was more of an out of game coach than anything. So it was a surprise to me that this kind of went down like that. And it's less likely, definitely, but I wouldn't write off the fact that Kassad could have been, the guy that was leading this a little bit, because if we remember the way he left 100 Thieves, as I understand it, he basically said, look, we need to make a roster move or we're not going to be a top team. And they didn't want to make a roster move. Like, I think that was supposed to be the reason he left, so it wouldn't be crazy for that to have happened either, I think, although it's more likely it came the other direction,
Yeah, I think it's a fair point that Kassad seems a bit more of an out of game type character. I think his impact is hard to understate, but if you're looking at like Henry G leading the charge on social media and also trying to deflect a lot of flack that would otherwise be directed at the players, I'm not saying that that's even a responsibility of an out of game coach necessarily, but that is something that I have seen historically a role held by coaches. And then if you also look at Alex being widely touted as a sort of a in-game heavy like demo review prep, I won't necessarily say mastermind, but certainly tactical, strategic type of character in terms of the IGL role. It feels to me like you have most of your bases covered initially, and you don't necessarily want to have Kassad, who's like got a vision of some sort for like team structure or something to that effect, who does have this pedigree and this reputation for being a very, very good at his job. You don't want him to just be another body in the C9 organization. If all he is just another ass in the seat and he's not really able to live up to his full potential, it's not going to be very satisfying for anybody involved, which is potentially what, like you said, it's potentially one of the reasons why maybe Kassad himself was one of the ones who was pushing for this. What's a little odd is that going from 100 Thieves, like the boys core basically, to Cloud9 and then back, because his move is to EXTREMUM now, which has picked up the core of 100 Thieves. And that's odd to me because it feels a little bit like he's going back to the well. And I was actually excited for his move to C9 because I wanted to see him succeed with a different roster and actually see put his skill set to the test. So I'm curious as to what you guys think about that.
Have they announced what they're doing with EXTREMUM yet? Do we know what the 5-man roster is or anything? Like, do we know if it's going to be all the 500 Thieves players or anything?
I think it's a partial one.
I don't think they can get JKS back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so they have Azure, Leah's, Gratis Faction, Jacob, and Kassad. I was very surprised to see Jacob out of Apex so quickly as well.
That's a weird one.
I don't know. I feel like, so they got rid of Nasty, right? But in my opinion, this is just my opinion, Marcelius is shit. And they needed to get rid of him. And Dennis should have been their main opper, because when I watched that team, when Dennis was opping on Train, that's when they did really well. On like their CT sides, when they ran the double op, Dennis got a lot of kills, and Marcelius kind of did whatever. So it very well, in my opinion, could have been that he wanted more changes quicker, and they didn't make it. It's also possible that he was just like, the Aussies are back. Like, let's go for it. But it seems kind of short-sighted for him to have joined that team if that was like on the table ever,
Yeah, that's what gets me is like maybe the EXTREMUM deal took some time to get through, but then you just consider your options. It's not like Apex were going to necessarily be playing a huge number of tournaments at the time that the 100 Thieves core became free agents. Like, I don't look at them and think, oh yeah, they're gonna. I think Apex even had to buy them out of his contract because they wanted to get him as soon as possible, right? Like I feel like that's something that happened, or they had to do something where they got him earlier than some of the other players were gotten, and that's a case where I just don't understand why they were going for that if there ever was a case. So it seems like maybe it blindsided the org. I think they had a little bit of salt
Yeah.
in the press release that they put out there.
I think it sounded like he signed a long-term contract, right?
Yeah.
And they had this idea
3
they were going
years,
to build
yeah.
something, and then just that's the weird thing as well is that I mean, surely it's going to cost a lot to get him out of that, right?
Yeah, I don't know
from what I'd heard, Apex were paying him well. Like that's what people seem to be saying.
Well, Apex doesn't. Yeah, as much as they are a tier 2 org in terms of in terms of the team as a tier 2 team, it seems it's before Jacob joined, and I guess after he leaves as well. They were obviously like from an organizational standpoint, they actually had backing. So word on the street is he was compensated fairly for his for that contract. So yeah, in that sense, it probably would have been a lot of money, which means EXTREMUM, I guess, are another player in the CS space that are coming in that also must have some sort of backing or some sort of deal went through somewhere. But that's one of those cases where it's like just surprising how soon they forget, how fast they ping pong.
That's the esports special. It's the esports special. Just join a team, 3-year contract. Oh, by the way, I don't like this. See ya. Like, jeez.
I think Freiburg had a permanent contract with Heroic some years ago, and I think he was out under a year later or something. So yeah, that's that doesn't.
What even is a permanent contract?
That's what it was. That's what it was. Forever? They announced Heroic. This is back before the rebrand for Heroic when they still had the green helmet guy, and this is like 2017, 2018 maybe, and people were talking about like 3-year contract. That's crazy, and something had come out from the Fury a 5-year contract or something crazy that happened at the same time, and like. All in succession. It was like 3 years. That's insane. 5 years. What are you thinking? Permanent contract. Like
I still think 5-year contracts and 3-year contracts in my opinion are probably not the greatest. I don't know. I'd have to look at some contracts. I'd have to see what the bench clause is and all that stuff. But it really just feels like the longer contract is only benefiting the org because like these players get benched. They get benched and then they're on like what 50 or 40% salary or something, or maybe even less if they don't sign a good contract. And then at any point the team can just be like, we are withdrawing from the CSGO scene. And it's just like, okay, so now that voids my contract apparently. Like, I guess I'm not making any money. Or, it just feels like the players are voluntarily, they're seeing 5 years. They're like 5 years of guaranteed money. And they just don't see the problems with that. And the fact that, if you're a good player, which a lot of, Furia players, I can see Furia players doing it. Brazil, there's a little bit of uncertainty there, maybe what org they'd go to. But like, a top North American player signing like a 3-5-year contract, it just feels like if you're good when the contract's coming to an end, they're going to re-sign you. And if you're bad, they're going to bench you anyways. Like, so what even is the point, right?
Yeah, I think especially just at least if you're going to sign a long contract, you have to put something in there that makes it somewhat possible that you can move at some point or like terminate the contract or something. Because otherwise you're just screwing yourself. Like shit changes so quick, man. Like I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ago, like look at where the CS scene was. It was completely different. Like, jeez.
Yeah, I mean, even with the way things change, like you could just be making half as much money as your peers. And I guess like the good teams would like renegotiate because they want to keep their players happy, which is, what you'd hope for, but that's not everyone. And I just want to reiterate that ENCE really got let off the hook for that Alexi B sign and bench instantly shit. Like that really felt pretty fucking shady to me, to be honest. Like re-signed him for a year and then they're like, by the way, we knew you were benched before we signed you. Like, okay. Like,
well, that's one of those cases that goes back to the whole ENCE thing where, oh yeah, Alu, you had no say in what went on in that team, buddy. That was you were not the imposter. Like, what the fuck, man? I don't know. There's a lot of cases that are like that. I feel like, obviously best wishes to Mr. Kassad. Hopefully he finds his boys back in town and hopefully everything goes well with him. But I'm not really sure what's up with the roster in general. I don't know who their fifth will be. Contracts. I brought this point up when I was talking with the guys from the Server Time show. And I was talking about this, like, why did ZywOo and Simple and Electronic all sign like multi-year contracts in 2020? It's the most uncertain year of CS in recent history. And these people are signing these long year contracts.
Understand it as a person, I guess, like you just want certainty. You want certainty. Yeah. I think the problem is that, from the outside, you can see that it's not really certain, but like from the inside, it's like 3 years. That's very certain. Like I'm certain I've got 3 years,
I just think, that the players just probably think, partly pretty short-minded, where they're just like, everything's good now, I'll just sign the contracts. Like they probably just don't think about it as much as we do. And as well, whatever happens, like the players are living a pretty fucking good life right now. I don't think they need to, like, from their perspective, they're probably like, yeah, I'm getting paid to play games, I like this, I'm just gonna sign a contract, right?
Yeah, hopefully. I think what has been a bit more normalized now is that I see it like the Prodigy agency or some of these other agencies that are linked in like a lot of these players' bios, and that seems to have been more common now. So hopefully they have people who are, you know, obliged to read over this stuff, who are, you know, essentially like signed with these players, and or I guess the players would be signed with the agencies, and hopefully that's happening to make sure that they are still best represented in terms of the terms of the contract, the clauses of the contract that could potentially be used to screw them over and have been leveraged against players in the past. This is also something that the CSPPA is supposed to be helping with, but well, supposed to be. I should just say this, the CSPPA is supposed to be. I think that would be a good way to leave that.
The Blast situation is still just very odd and up in the air. I don't know if there's ever going to be a real conclusion to that saga.
Yeah, I don't know. I had Scrawny on the interview show the other day to talk about, amongst other things, that exact sentiment and what went down. And he had some choice words for them and said that it seems like it was more of a publicity stunt than an actual good meaning, good intentioned move. And also, like, for news to come out after the fact, we had the teams release a joint statement, including Mouse Sports with Chris J and all that stuff.
I don't know. I don't think you can necessarily trust the teams necessarily.
Sure. You got to take it with a grain of salt.
They are taking money from Blast. Like, they took money out of the prize pool to give to the orgs. Of course they want to support Blast, and they want to say, hey, buddy, we got your fucking back. You gave us more money and took it out of the prize pool. We got you, fam. Like, we're on the same side here, you know? So, like, I think you got to take that with a grain of salt. I still lean towards thinking that the players made a mistake, like that was the players' fault. But, you know, I don't want to fully say anything like that. I think a more damning thing for me about the CSPPA is the whole North America thing, where ESL couldn't be budged. We can't possibly, NA's dead. Like, what could we do? We couldn't get another slot. And then all of a sudden ESL's like, hey, we got some money over in the bag over here. Let's support NA. It's like, so what you're saying is if CSPPA had striked or they had taken action, that another slot for EPL could have been available. Like, you had the money for that. It was possible. And they just didn't take the act. Like, I think that's damning to me more so than anything else.
Yeah. No, a main point too is to think about the fact that I think this is something that Thorin brought up on the By the Numbers, where he mentioned that if the other teams that were in EPL had agreed to a reduction in prize pool, then they would have been able to potentially fund the other teams out of that prize pool. And in theory, like, it could have opened that up. Or if they were willing to come to some sort of conclusion or agreement on just in general reducing the amount of expenses that ESL had to set aside, assuming their budget stays the same, but they still need to support additional teams, then you just, in theory, you could just downgrade the amount that you're paying out to all of these other teams, because they are flying them out and then putting them up and all this other stuff. So it makes sense why ESL would need to downsize, but you don't necessarily need to cut the slots if you can afford to reduce expenditures elsewhere. And if the teams were not interested in that, it kind of reinforces this growing narrative that CSPPA is all about Western tier 1 pros, and that obviously excludes like CIS, because as Simple was seen on one of his streams recently, like there's apparently not really a whole lot of CIS support either. So I don't know, that whole thing is a mess. We don't necessarily have to linger on it too much, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on it, Hawka, or if you want us to just move on to the other stuff.
I'm pretty much. I think most of the things that need to be said have been said. I think the one thing that stuck out to me was, again, like the fact that this is the first thing we're going to strike for in history. Yeah. It's just a bit like, come on, guys, we could have done a bit better than this.
I struggle to believe that the prize pool thing isn't somehow related. Like, maybe that made the teams more likely to want to strike or something. Like, I feel like, because Blast did literally just say, like, the prize pool, not the prize pool anymore. It's smaller. We're giving more money to the teams, and the players don't see anything about that. And it's funny that the Reddit response was like, should have had it in your contract. It's like, who the fuck is going to predict that that's something we need in the contract? Like, who saw this one coming? Who in the world predicted this? Like, I could see them being on edge with Blast because of that. And then going forward, I can also see the players, like, as has been speculated, just being like, well, there could be a problem here. And because there could be a problem and we're all fucking cheaters, like, wait, there is a problem and they are cheating. Like, I could really definitely see that being the case as well.
Yeah, well, it's also a fair point on the whole like blast thing. Like the Reddit narrative there that you should have had it in your contract. I guess you should have also had like pandemic insurance in your contract for this year. Like should have had like, oh, if I get sick with this ridiculous disease, then I sure hope that you guys will still pay me money. Like you should have had all that stuff in there. Just
if aliens come and get beamed down and steal my job playing Counter-Strike and are really good, I need a quick alien fucking thing on my contract. Man. Like, geez,
why not? Yeah, well, I mean,
you are not allowed to use my likeness in the bot major. Like, it's very important.
Yeah, exactly. What the hell? I still can't believe that. What a ridiculous reality. Well, I mean, you know who is allowed to use the likeness is the CSPPA because they have all the image rights. So,
yeah.
Fuck it, man. All right, let's talk about Fallen to Liquid. What do you guys think of this move? Because this is a puzzling one to me. Fallen seems very much past expiration date to me. So maybe you guys can convince me otherwise. Does he just need a better team? Does he just need a new, fresh start for this old man to once again do it in the server? Or are we predicting that this one will fall flatter than most people think? Because most people seem hyped for it. Most people are like, oh yeah, cool, Fallen again. Sure, put him in there. What do you guys think?
I feel like I think most people aren't hyped about this.
That's why I think really? maybe casuals are hyped for it. Is the only thing I can think.
Casuals like Twistzz hair. Like casual really like Twistzz. Yeah, that is the casual opinion.
Yo, guys, scream,
I'm burning
headshot
my
machine.
liquid.
Bring back Scream.
I'm burning my liquid jersey. Like I can't believe you'd get rid of Twistzz. Like that's casual Reddit in my experience.
Okay, sure.
I will say to be fair that I think Fallen as a player is still fine from what I've seen. I don't think he hasn't shown that he can update his calling, right? He just hasn't shown he's been able to adapt to the current meta of Counter-Strike. I just don't think he's proven that at all. I'm concerned in that sense, especially because I don't know if there's anyone on Liquid who's going to be able to have as much of a say as Fallen. Like, will Moses be able to get through to him?
Oh,
maybe,
yeah, true.
But I don't know if Moses is the kind of guy who's going to be very hands-on with that sort of thing.
So I've heard the opposite actually. Like I've heard a few people say that Moses is more of an out-of-game coach. I can't confirm if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard mention of.
That makes sense.
And then fits,
and then if Fallen's going to be running most of the actual things in game, then I don't have much faith for this move personally.
I wish Adren was still there for this move. Like I think Adren was a good coach for this type of leader. I feel like Fallen's a leader that can motivate people off the server. I think he's a good like leader of men type of situation, and I think he's got the ability. But I think I'm hoping because I'm cautiously optimistic for this. I'm hoping that he's been kind of humbled by the MIBR situation, the fact that his group got cut, like his boys got shipped out, and they did better. Like that could be very humbling for a guy like Fallen to see that type of situation where he thought he knew what was going on, he thought he knew the best route, and that happens. Like I think the fire could be there to bring that back. And I think with Adren as the coach, when I think he's a much more in-game coach, like very just only in-game coach, it feels like. Maybe I could be hearing wrong about Moses. He's a really great in-game coach, in which case I'd be, more for it. If Adren was coaching, I'd be very for this. I think this is a very good move. I'm still cautiously optimistic. I think it could have been humbling. I think he can do well. I think they need a fucking Opper and they need a good IGL, and I think Fallen could be both. So, and I still think, in my opinion, Nitro still wasn't that. I don't think Nitro was ever like the real Opper, like a star Opper. I think he was just kind of fit the bill of like, my opinion is that there are maps and situations where opping is fun, like CT Inferno. Who doesn't want to op there? You just run around the map and kill everybody. But then T Inferno opping, you need to do it occasionally. You need to have that in your repertoire. But it's not fun. Like T train opping, is that fun? No, so Nitro would do it, right? But you didn't really have that real opper, so I think Fallen could add that. I'm hoping it goes well. But it's possible Fallen's just kind of not able to update.
Dude, I'm pretty sure James loves playing T-side Inferno Warp. He gets to save all the time, man. Hell yeah. Another save, boys.
Fucking hell.
Sanji, get my checkbook.
No, I think Moses, on him quickly, I do think he has the ability to grow into coaching more, obviously. Like, he hasn't been a coach for a long time. I think he's even said he has a lot to learn in coaching. So I assume right now he's going to be very hands-off. Maybe he can develop into more of a hands-on coach in game in the future. I just don't think that's going to be Moses' strength. So I think it would be, like you said, his ability to be amicable with the players and to push them outside of the server. So yeah, I personally, I'm not going to take the bait on this one, Vu. I know you have, but I think you're a little fish right now, just getting sucked up, honestly.
I think Moses might be able to get them to be down with 10 a.m. match times. You know, he might get them down with that.
That would be the biggest win for a coach, honestly.
The only thing about this Fallen thing that's really funny to me is the reaction to Twistzz getting removed. Yes. I mentioned this, I think, last episode. It was just so fucking weird, man. It was like, this is what I expect if like Pokimane got cut from her Among Us team. It was just like, I'm burning my Liquid jersey. I can't believe they would do this. Twistzz, I love his hair so much.
If only his hair gave him like
it was really weird, man. Yeah. It was like I was living in an alternate reality with this shit.
Now the Liquid anime will never come out. No.
Well, that's the thing. It feels almost like it's a natural destination for Twistzz to go to FaZe now, because that's his team. His supporters were already on FaZe. They had no idea, but they were already FaZe fans. They just didn't know it. So I guess we can talk about the other half of that move. Do you guys think, I mean, that's the rumor, is that FaZe is in talks. I felt like that's almost like the community forced that into existence, though, because I don't see how he necessarily like decidedly improves FaZe, particularly since coldzera is on the record saying they're signing an in-game leader. And for my money, I think they were only looking for a replacement for Olaf. So unless they're also replacing other players on that FaZe roster, Twistzz can't really jump in and have his impact, right?
I wouldn't mind Twistzz for Kirby. I'd take that.
Oh, you know what they could do? Minus Olaf. Wait, do they have 5 players? Yeah, because Olaf is the 5th.
Yes,
right?
he's the 10th.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I thought they also had another gap for some reason. I didn't realize they had 5.
I mean, Kirby's on the team.
Yeah. Minus Kirby plus Twistzz, minus Olaf plus Happy. Get Happy.
Oh, what is that? Dude, isn't Happy? Is he playing like Valorant right now or something?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I saw a Happy versus Existence game in Valorant, I remember. And I was like, oh my god.
How can Valorant ever catch up to CS when they're already 5 years behind? Get them out of here.
I know, right? They're actually going to slowly go backwards in time in Valorant. So they're starting with Happy and Existence, and then they'll go back to like Source in-game leaders. You know, they're slowly going to go back, and they're going to be playing with 50-year-olds soon.
Wasn't it Get Right who announced he's going to Valorant anyway? So that's already happened.
Oh, he did actually, yeah.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
There we go.
Well, I mean, Existence was a Source IGL. I think Happy probably was too. You know, you never know. Apparently, Existence. He's got a frag movie, Existence History 2. One of the best Source frag movies. Just saying. I'm a fucking dinosaur. I remember that shit. Like,
yeah, you played the French edition of Counter-Strike. So
yes. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I mean, there was Frenchies, and then there was the French Canadians. Yeah. The French Canadians dominated NA, and the Frenchies dominated Europe, I think, as far as I'm aware.
What a wild time. French dominance may yet come to pass once again, but it'll have to be in Valorant, I guess. I don't know.
Not for 2020. That's not even top 2 in 2020.
Yeah, fuck them. They suck.
They suck, yeah.
It's so shitty.
What a ridiculous existence. So what I have to ask you is, with this fall into Liquid, with Twistzz in talks to FaZe, if FaZe does pick up Twistzz and they drop Kirby, I guess, for the sake of argument, because he's not going to be their IGL, and coldzera has already said they don't want an IGL. Actually, that's the other thing, is like, I don't know if Twistzz has space on a roster if coldzera goes back to being just a rifler, or just like the coldzera player that he is, instead of like he becomes coldzera the player instead of the IGL. Again, I'm not sure how there's going to have space for that, but say they do, for the sake of argument, who's going to be their caller? Are there free agents that are out there that you guys are keeping track of that you'd like to see?
Kerrigan still got the Kerrigan rumor.
Oh, they do. That is right.
But I don't think Twistzz works in with that. I don't think, because Kerrigan wants to bring Rops. He wants to bring someone along, right? Like Rops apparently. So that's a bit odd. If you got who else are they going to replace? They're not replacing Brokey. Who's their 5th? They got Careby, Cold, Brokey, Rain.
How could you forget? Yeah. It's okay, I did too. So.
Rain really is just like that guy that's kind of there, but you don't remember he's there. He's just kind of there. Yeah, I mean, you're not adding all 3, so Twistzz to Ents. I did this one as a troll, and people are like, "Get out of my timeline."
Might happen. Ents has seems like they're going more in the international side, or they're going away from Finnish only lineup. So like, there's just apparently not enough talent or something. Some such.
I'm trying to think of other teams that would make any sense for Twistzz.
I mean, what we it's hard to know what like Mouse Sports and FaZe are doing right now. Is the tough thing, right? Like I don't know what's happening with those two rosters. I feel like we need stuff to start being announced, and then you can start to maybe make sense of it a bit more.
Oh, replace Issa on OG. This guy in chat.
Oh yeah, that was the other
that's
one
the
people
move.
wanted.
Yeah, that's the big move. That would be a really good move. Yeah.
People are down on Issa in general. Is it just that he's too up and down, or is he just consistently below par? Because I haven't seen. I admittedly have not been able to track his.
I think
impact.
he's set up for success, but he doesn't bring it home the way a better player did.
Like he's not bad. It's like you said. He gets put in pretty good spots. I also think it doesn't help him that he's playing from Jordan in the online era. So I think he has like 80 ping at least, just constantly. That probably sucks.
That's big.
Hey, that's good enough to play in a grand final against Astralis. That's a sleeper hit, Kerrigan. Love you, buddy.
Yeah, I just think with OG, it's either MBK or Issa you're replacing, and Twistzz would not replace MBK, right? So,
well, yeah, the MBK angle doesn't make sense because he's basically, well, I guess it does make sense because in classic French style, he would found another team and then get kicked. But after what happened to Vitality, I'm sure there's some clause in there like, I cannot be kicked. Something. That's the only clause. But yeah, I feel like that's a solid move to OG.
I don't know I just don't know. Wait, is Twistzz like free right now? Is he a free agent? Because I get the feeling that OG, I mean, Alexi B, he doesn't want to make moves, I don't think. But I also get the feeling that I don't think like OG could break the bank for a player, let's say.
Yeah, well, the question is, I think teams are, I don't know. I was going to say, I think teams are usually pretty lenient when they voluntarily bench someone to like kind of let them go.
Yeah,
especially NA teams. Especially NA teams are usually pretty good about that. Like TSM, Liquid, C9, from my experience, they're pretty good about that. Some EU teams are seems like they're a little bit less lenient on that in that regard. But if it's true, which it seems like it might be, that Twistzz wanted to, step down, then that's a different story. I think they're a little bit less lenient in that regard. So it's hard to say.
Sense. The other things that are weird right now with rosters is that we have like a lot of players, like the Gen G players, for example, like a lot of players where we're just not really sure what's happening with them. Like it almost feels like there are going to be too many free agents and not enough orgs right now. Because I haven't heard what's happening with the Gen G guys at all.
Correct, yeah.
Have they been rumored to maybe be in on the new EXTREMUM team? Like, I feel like there have maybe been rumors that some of those players could end up with some of the EXTREMUM guys or whatever.
There's only one spot on EXTREMUM now, so it would just be automatic maybe.
Get Obo on that team.
Yeah, or Obo.
Oh, dude, Obo's still about, isn't he?
Yeah, that's a crazy one that he's still
dude, get me Obo on a team. God damn.
I know.
Yeah, well, he said he's down to go to EU, right?
He did say
that. Really,
I would be a little bit uncomfortable with that one. Although, like, I understand the situation. You're like 17, right? And you're living in Europe, and you don't know when you can go home. And you're like, you've been there for a while, and it's just like you didn't even know you were being here forever. Like when you left, it was just like it just happened. Like I can understand that entirely. But I imagine teams are pretty tentative about making that one happen again.
Yeah, it was weird for him to say, I think he said like fed up with 2020's bullshit or something, and he had a tweet where he said, looking for NA and EU. I don't care. Get me on a team. Basically what Hawka said. He's like, get me on a team.
It sucks because I bet if he knew it was only going to take him like a short amount of time to get over it, I reckon he would have said, just get me a stand-in for complexity and I'll come back. But he doesn't have that option now because I assume he just didn't know how long it was until he was going to be fine again.
Well,
just sucks.
Yeah, I think the way it was described was literally like he was planning on going back or something, and then one morning he just called up and he's like,
he
I'm
just
leaving.
went to the airport. I think.
Yeah.
I think he called Jason Lake from the airport, is what I heard.
Yeah,
but
that's burnout, buddy. That's he's donezo.
And fair play to him for like making that decision. That's a hard decision, man.
Yeah, it's got to be rough. And as the org of complexity, like how do you maintain that relationship? Like it's pretty tough. Like the players on the team aren't gonna like trust them after that either, right? It kind of has to be severed. It feels like when that happens, which is unfortunate. If he was willing to go back afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially because the thing I love about Obo is like he was so consistent. He was playing some pretty bad spots on CT side, which is rare for a young player. Like there was so much to like about this guy. He didn't take up that much space on the team and was just consistently putting up such good numbers. Like we got to get this guy on another team, man. I don't want to see Obo go to Valorant. That would be the most depressing shit ever.
Well, that's the other thing is I just hope he doesn't go the way of Smooya, where like obviously it's a different case in terms of how they have left their respective teams, and obviously Smooya was like right before a major, so certainly blew up a lot more than that. But the idea of like extenuating circumstances leading to a team, parting ways with a player, and then they just play like roster hopscotch until they eventually have to face the facts, like face the music. And I guess the rumor is that if Smooya doesn't find a team in January, he's got to pay the bill somehow. So he's moving to Valorant, and he has offers. So like if that were to happen, that's already a loss for CS in my opinion, even though Smooya is obviously a player that some people are not so happy with. But that goes back to like the narratives. I feel like he does deal quite a bit of damage in the server, and we will be worse for wear without him.
Smooya is a top 20 player in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think he's like borderline, but I think he's a top 20 player.
Smooya. Yeah.
Smooya? No, he's not going to get there this year. Anyway.
Yeah, no.
Like if he's on a team, I think he's a top 20 player. Like 18 range, right? In my opinion,
I think he
really
could get there for sure. Yeah, it's weird. There's like a lot of free agents right now, and it doesn't seem like there are that many orgs interested in coming in. Like there's even IGLs. I think Snappy's available. I think Crystal's available. Like obviously these aren't the best IGLs or whatever, but there's a lot of pieces out there right now. And I just worry that it doesn't sound to me like there are a lot of orgs that are going to come in and create teams. I'm kind of worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, the contact roster is in limbo. That's where Snappy's at. And, you could blow that roster up and just pick like 2 or 3 pieces from it and have a very serviceable start for like a team that could challenge for like the tier 2 titles and could even sort of like play spoiler to some of the tier 1 teams that they face. Like that seems reasonable. That's what contact should have been for my money, is like looking at the talent on that roster if it could be actualized by Snappy. But it didn't feel like they had enough time to gel. I actually don't know how long that roster was boot camping for or whatever, but that was one of those cases where I thought it was weird that contact just dropped them. But
dude, they had their roster was just constantly making moves. It felt like like every month there was a new guy in, new guy out. It never felt like there was a consistent 5.
Well, the other problem with
contact
contact
got kind of screwed by crazy, right?
Oh well.
Well, I mean, screwed by the pandemic. Really, it's like we're gonna buy this roster for a shit ton of money for the major.
Yeah.
What major?
Oh yeah, are they even retaining spots? I don't think
they are. Like I think they basically just threw $1 million or what 1.7 or something. I think it just into thin air. Like just gone.
The former crazy owner must be sitting there right now, like damn. Good time to cash out, boys. He sold at the peak. Like Bitcoin had just peaked, and he fucking sold.
That was, and from like I don't know, from what people have talked about the crazy guy, like a lot of people seem to not like the crazy owner.
Oh yeah,
and he did so well, and it's like wow, this is the guy that makes all the money.
Yep. Yeah, he made it somehow. I really would like to see like whatever remnants of contact come up. I'd like to see them get a solid like shot at forming like a tier 2 or 1.5 team or something like that. I feel like they could do some damage at some of these, like obviously the 9-to-5s and like the home sweet homes and all those. And I think they could make an entry into like the Dream Hacks and even some of the other tournaments. Like they could qualify to some of these other online tournaments that we're seeing that are featuring tier 1 teams. Like they could be probably not as good as a Gambit, but they could be like in that same talking area in terms of where they're at.
If we're talking about orgs, I feel like it's a huge opening for EU orgs to pick up like an NA team,
Yeah, High Coast
or at least some NA players, dude,
yeah,
for sure.
There's so many free agents in NA. You could just, with all the free agents, basically, you could make a good team, like a really good team for free, and then you just give them huge buyouts, and then EG buys them off you later, like
Dude, you can even like that. There is struggling for AWPers in NA. You could even just get Smooya in there, like that's going to round out the roster fucking nicely.
Sure, that would go perfectly. Like nothing could possibly go wrong with Smooya on a roster.
What gets me is with Smooya on an NA roster specifically. I feel like the European players, and maybe this is obviously like I'm pretending to be Davey here when I say Europe, the country Europe. But when it comes to Europe, it's like there are some regions within Europe where the players there deal with stress and they deal with like essentially teammates who would be considered toxic with our NA mindset. They deal with that kind of interaction, and maybe they even like welcome it, but they can handle it and they can see it for what it is like a person who's trying to succeed, and he's like trying to make sure that you know that he's trying to succeed and he thinks that this is a problem and you guys can hash it out like mature adults. But the presentation isn't to the same level of what we want in North America. So in the North American scene, it's like you have the backbiting, the little, comments, the passive aggressiveness, I'm sure Vu could speak for hours on this particular topic, is like the way that players handle cutting each other or just talking about each other and like resolving problems. Is there even conflict resolution in NA? Like, you're not going to be able to facilitate that. I feel like basically SmoothYa has to do a lot more work than he's probably used to outside of the server, doing stuff that in theory has nothing to do with playing Counter-Strike.
Imagine Cloud9 plus SmoothYa minus Woxic.
I think they would actually be more consistent, honestly.
I feel like that actually could be a change, like a serious change. Like, Woxic has not looked the greatest. And
it's the online era. Like, he's not able to really activate, it feels like. I don't know.
Yeah, he struggled towards the end of Mouse Sports as well, right? So, like, hopefully it's an online thing. But
it was a gamble a little bit to pick him up for the C9 roster. But when we looked at it, it was like, okay, we're trying to buy into this Colossus. Like, they seem to know what they're doing. They have a methodology. They have a reasoning. They gave us some answers. They told us why. And unfortunately, Woxic didn't live up to the billing there. And I think there was even some discussion as to Woxic specifically, like how when he's on, but a lot of the times he'll push for no reason, or he'll seemingly like make these mistakes that feel like he's overextending and 100%. Will turn like 5v4s into 4v4s instead, or something like that.
I think absolutely that's something Woxic does like way too much, and I just think he's doing pretty poorly on C9. SmoothYa free agent. What? You already got 2 UK. Oh, I guess people count Alex as French, don't they? It's a little bit.
He's got the flag. He counts.
It's iffy. It's iffy, but they've already got 2 UK players. Could work. I mean, SmoothYa going to NA would be interesting. He didn't mesh with Steel, but I mean, that's not a surprise. Like, that's not a huge surprise.
Yeah, he's more of a loose player, it seems like, from the outside.
If anyone's not going to mesh with Steel, it's going to be SmoothYa. So I mean, SmoothYa going to Cloud9, in my opinion, would be in fact a positive move and a cheat move. Although I'm not sure Henry G wants to make any cheat moves. Like,
not his money, he doesn't care, right? So that seems to be the prevailing notion. So one of the things I also was sort of like a sleeper hit here, but Guild Esports is still looking to make a splash. I don't know if they're doing a tier 2. They've got funding. I don't know if they're setting their sights on like British MDL or if what's going on there, but like, I don't know what they're going to be doing in general. I don't know what they're trying to do, but I mean, if you wanted a British born, an English guy to come on and represent your org as Guild,
you don't want SmoothYa.
You don't want SmoothYa, but maybe you do, is what I'm saying.
You're just like, if you want someone to come on and represent your org, not SmoothYa, then.
What do you think, Hawka?
Yeah, it was said that Thorin was going to be like consulting for Guild, right? Yeah. So they'll probably pick up like MSL or someone, They'll probably just go down that road.
They'll get existence.
Yeah. No. I mean, there's just a lot of options in EU right now. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Thorin recommends they choose someone like Snappy just to like try and build a team that's going to have like a decent base.
I don't know if Thorin wants to go anywhere near Danish. I don't think Thorin wants anywhere near Denmark.
I mean, it's probably more that just like if you just want an IGL who's probably going to create a decent team that's free. He's your best bet, probably. Him or Crystal.
Wouldn't be a bad one. I mean, at least you can get the building blocks. I think especially like Crystal is who I'd be looking at. Snappy's of course a good shout. To like get it together, and you hate to call players disposable, but if you're really looking for a tier 1 team, I don't think Crystal's getting there, but he can get you a good start, get things going, and then you go from there.
Wasn't that some tweet that he had where he said time to get another team into the top 30 when he was dropped by Godsend? Although he also said that Godsend was going to be worse with them, and then they were like, fuck you, Astralis.
Yeah.
So whatever. It didn't work
that could always just be the classic like carryover effect from the IGL, right? We've seen that so often.
It almost certainly is, but it is excellent timing for his brand. Just love to see it. So I want to see where we can go with like talking about some of these, we could talk about roster moves all day, but one of the things that I also wanted to comment on, since we were talking about Crystal, FPX is supposed to go for a godsend here. I mean, this is a move that was like last year we knew about this. It feels, I mean, obviously last year, but like last whole calendar year, like 365 days ago, we knew about this shit. So I wonder what's taken so long. It must have been contracts, legal work, boring stuff.
They did the shit again. They did it again where they announced it, and they're still working on contracts, but they announced it. It's like, well,
classic.
Man, come on.
They did do a brand refresh. So they were like, in addition to refreshing our brand, here's more of the same, just like last time. But I think that this could be a good move for the Godsend players anyway, because Godsend seems like a team, ever since they picked them up, because that team used to be smashed. And now it's obviously that they traded a couple players, but I feel like that team could be, I mean, it's supposed to be playing in Flashpoint 3 since they're a partner org. So we're definitely going to be able to see them against some high tier competition, assuming everybody returns. And obviously some of the other teams that still haven't announced their rosters. Like, that was another point I wanted to bring up with Contact. Like, those guys have like 300 followers on their Twitter account or something. Like, what are they doing? Where are they? They don't talk. So yeah, if FPX can start talking better than Contact, I mean, they've already done that, so they're already better than them. I don't know. What do you?
I just realized I've got to feed my dog quickly. Can you give me a minute?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll be right back. You guys keep talking.
Sure. Well, look at your TV and Wii and PS3 in the background there, and sort of take stock. What do you think about his wallpaper of birds?
It's interesting. This is not like a coordinated. Listen, we're gonna break this one down. This is not like a in my opinion, a well coordinated, setup. This is not one mind that went into this setup. This is multiple minds. This is like, I'm guessing this is his parents' place. I can only assume based on the furniture and the TV that this is his parents' place. And he was like, let's put in a wallpaper in the back or something. I don't know. This is very 90s parents making all the decisions on everything, and you just sit a computer in there with the chair.
Yeah, it looks like he's got a table to the right as well. I don't know.
I mean, my room here, my office is all my own design choices, and it looks like it. It looks like a YouTuber CSGO player made this design decision.
Yeah. Well, you got to look
as much
the part
shit on Hawka as possible when he's gone. That's what Dwight said.
A classic Dwight comment, of course. Well, we got to have some fun. But here comes the yellow jacket.
Yeah, so that Hawka guy fucking...
Oh
my God,
it's so awkward. Oh, wait, that's me, shit.
It's okay,
It turns out my mom had already fed the dogs, so...
you got out scot-free.
Got up for nothing.
So we were speculating on whether or not you made the design choices in this room.
I did not. So I'm in my parents' conservatory right now, which is a very middle-class British thing to have, yeah.
Can you explain a conservatory to us? Yeah,
it's basically just like a building that's just like, it's basically just windows is the building. That's it.
Wait, is your bed in there?
No. I have my bedroom is upstairs.
It's a
Wi-Fi
detached
sucks.
building.
It's basically, you don't have to get planning permission to make a conservatory because it's like kind of crappy walls and mostly just windows. So it's just like an easy thing you can just add on. That's literally it.
Do you get cold? Does it get cold in there?
It gets either very cold or very warm because it's just like mostly windows.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of sucks, honestly.
It's like living outside inside. It's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's some British education for us. I'm
there
sure
you go.
Smooya is also feeling right at home with this particular part of the episode. So yeah, I mean, we can sort of start winding down here. We mentioned very briefly High Coast picked up an NA roster. They picked up ex-Whalers. That was a nice notice, and that goes to show what Vu was saying. Because High Coast apparently have a Swedish team, but they're going to be moved down to High Coast Academy. Although moving down, I think it's like a lateral move for them, but they're just called High Coast Academy. And that was a little surprising to me, but very, very happy for them. Big props. Obviously, Extra Salt earlier in December were announced to have picked up the old C9 roster, obviously minus Floppy, and I'm not sure if they've announced their fifth, but in theory, most of that core is still the same, and that could also be pretty nice. It's nice to see that Vu came on an episode of Esports Samaritans with Note and Davey and myself, and we talked about the future of NA. And we saved it because immediately after that, we had some teams pick up some NA rosters. So you're welcome, guys.
We did that. Precisely what we did is we brought in those South African backers and those Swedish backers, and we got them into North America. We breathed life into NA. That's what we did.
Now, if you could just save Chaos, please.
Yes.
Can we please save Chaos, please?
Here's the thing. If High Coast is coming to NA, there must be a reason they didn't get Chaos instead of Whalers, right? Like, because Chaos is just a better team.
It could be budget concerns to pay the players, but I mean, I assume that they probably would have started negotiations with Chaos before going to Whalers, right? Like that's
well, I mean, I think probably what might have happened is they just wanted a 5-man roster, and as it seems, they're not getting all 5 from Chaos, even if they got the roster.
Yeah, Leaf seems to be totally moved on, for example. I think I've seen probably like Zeppa and Vanity have been playing Valorant. So hopefully they're able to get a secure career. It would be like the weirdest timeline if the only NA roster that didn't get saved by outside investment was the one that won 2 tournaments back to back locally in NA. That would be fucking weird, man. So that might happen though. So just saying.
Well, I think the thing is because they're so good, they're getting like tier 1 offers in Valorant and stuff. And they, Zeppa and Vanity almost went to Gen G. So it's like you see the tier 1 opportunities and you just go for it. Whereas like Whalers, they've got some good players, but it's not as obvious for them to switch to tier 1 anything,
True. Yeah, that's fair. Just on its face, it seems very bizarre that would be the case there.
Yeah.
And, at least NA's not dead. As my note here says, NA not dead, Poggers. So Poggers in the chat. And I don't know. Do you guys have any lighthearted predictions for 2021? Pretty much anything goes here. Just curious as to like, we could talk about like everything we want to see. What should Valve do differently? What should the TOs do differently? But I mean, like I said,
we know when Astralis' contracts are up. Astralis doesn't re-sign. That's my prediction for 2021.
That's actually probably a safe bet if I had to guess.
Yeah, like at least some of the players on the roster, right? Almost certainly, it feels like thinking about other things.
Yeah, well, I think it was basically confirmed now that Zipix was being shopped around. So, I mean, at least that seemed. I've heard so many different people say that. It's obviously not in confidence at this point. It's been talked about like on by the numbers and stuff. So, I feel like at this point, it's just there's a lot of people who I'm sure are going to be interested in that whole roster or piecemeal, whatever the case may be, and. I mean, props to Esatag for making that money, man. That's all I can say for this like short tenure on there.
Oh boy!
Good job, Henry G. Jack won't miss that money. Don't worry.
There you go. There's some predictions you can make. What do we think Cloud9's going to do into 2021?
I hope
they don't make if they don't make any roster changes, then I don't think they're going to do well. But if we're talking about whether or not they make roster changes, I don't know. I think they're going to take a little while to do it, but they will eventually if they keep up where they're at. I think Woxic needs to turn things around, or he's on the way out pretty quick.
At least he was paid well while he was there. We can say. I mean, while he's there, because of course it's still a maybe. We got Bill in the chat asking, where do we think that Astralis pros can go? This is actually a really interesting thought experiment because I've for the longest time just assumed all those players are going to be sticking together and on the Astralis organization. Or if they do leave, it's like all 5 of them.
I figured they leave together, right? Yeah, that's what I would guess. But, that's the thing, because I've said this before. If I was Astralis, I would not have signed them to the same contract length just to make sure they can't leave together because that would be a disaster, right? But if they can leave together, player-owned org, like any org would pick them up. Like any tier 1 org, they're gonna want that 5. That's such a money 5.
I do feel like it's more likely that they stick together since they've reascended to the top tier. Are we still out on Bubsky being an actual member of Astralis at this point? Like it doesn't feel like he's a real rotation. Like he's just in for one map. It's almost like, well, we have to put him in, so.
They were just really bad on Nuke with Zipnix, man. Like I'm telling you, people don't see it for some reason, but they went from like 14-2 with Esatag to like 1-5 with Zipnix. It's like it's just not working. It's not working very well with Bubsky either, admittedly. But like they were so bad with Zipnix on Nuke that you go from your best map to your worst map. You just make a change. You got to do something. I don't think it was anything to do with being a 6-man roster.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Glaive say in an interview something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, like Bubsky could play in the team if he didn't play so aggressively," or wasn't there was something like that? And it's like, okay, you picked up this guy What did you see from him in his other team? Because that's what he does. That's the role he plays. So why are you picking him up if you want him to completely change his game? Like what? Yeah, it's just weird.
The one concerning thing about Bubsky, they might bring Zipnix back on Nuke. I look. Someone posted the stats on Reddit of it was one of those pure Reddit things, which is his kill death on CT side versus T side on Nuke, and it's like, yeah, he did worse on T side. Like that's how the map works, by the way. Like you do worse on T side, but he died almost every round. It was like 65 deaths in 70 rounds or something, which is not what ESIC or Zipnix did, which does suggest exactly that. But he plays pretty aggressive, gets himself killed quite a bit.
He's not set up for success, though, I feel like. I mean, if Glave's going on podcasts and shouting him out for being too aggressive, instead of like having that be an internal team discussion, I don't know, man. There's got to be something where maybe that was an attempt and they just couldn't get it through to him in private. So they're like, fuck it, man. Just you'd play on the team if you weren't so bad. I mean,
why'd they pick him up? Like that's Hawka is exactly the point. Like why pick him up? You know, except for what he's got. Like you're picking him up for something he's not.
Well, ass in the seat, right? That's pretty much why they picked up Yugi and Snappy and all these other players that were just there for 5 seconds. So whatever. I don't know. I feel like if we're looking at it at this point, it does seem pretty likely that that roster is not going to stick together, or at least that roster with that org is not going to maintain union. So I actually got to say I'm looking forward to it because I feel like they've had to deal with if the level that they've shown us at the end of 2020 is anywhere close to the level that they can be when they're not dealing with all of the drama and the back end bullshit of having the, mastermind Nicola Nyholm and running this player owned org, then it would be really nice to see like what they can actually do when they don't have, like when they're able to full focus, basically, when they don't have to worry about that in the background. That's like the most interesting and exciting aspect of the potential Astralis stuff for me.
The thing that scares me is if just like a couple of the players have really good ties to the org. Yes. Like, what do you do then if you're someone like ZipX who wants to leave? Like, you want to stick with this roster, but oh man, if a couple of the players are like really bought into the Astralis org itself, or they really like feel like they want to stick with it, that would suck because we don't want to see this roster split apart, obviously.
What might happen is the roster might go, but Zonic might be on a different situation. That would be very interesting.
Yeah, it would all just come down to like which players are tied to the org most. And like I feel like from what we've seen publicly, like Zonic would be one, Device would be one. I don't know where Device's head would be at. I don't know. Like I don't know if he'd want to move on or not. It's all speculation, obviously, but obviously we just want this team to stick together if possible.
Much agreed there. And do you guys have any other predictions? Any other things that you wanted to get off your chests? Now's the time because it looks like we're wrapping stuff up here.
Predictions. I think Fallen to Liquid is going to end up being a good move, and people are gonna say, like, okay, people are still gonna hate on it because they love Twistzz for some reason, like way too much. But I think they'll do better with Fallen. I'm just saying, long term, short term, there's going to be some growing pains probably, but long term, I think they got it.
Okay. I do not agree with that. I think they'll get maybe I'll just say like slightly worse. I think they'll get like I don't think it's going to be completely shit.
Slightly worse than 7th in the whole world.
Sure.
Well, they were pretty bad in NA.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Slightly worse feels like without that last tournament run. Are they even top 10? Like that's the question. Without coming second in Global Challenge, are they top 10? I don't know if they are.
Did you have any final sort of prediction there, Hawka? I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any hot takes. I mean, the only thing that's on my mind is recently I've been like trying to make a video of hot prospects, and I do think Flames from Endpoint is someone who's like let's say I was picking a player at the end of the year to be like good next year or whatever, like they do on HLTV. Flames would be someone I'd be thinking about if you want like a lesser known guy who seems like he could be really good. I don't know if he'll get good in 2021. But I think like long term, he looks like a really good prospect. So look out for Flames.
I think Shiro will be pretty good next year.
Dude, that's the thing that tilts me, bro. They're all gonna say Shiro in their top 20 thing, and it's like Shiro's been playing tier 1 tournaments now. Like, come on, guys.
I think like a prediction there is Gambit is gonna be like. I mean, people are still seeing them, like already seeing them, but like I feel like they don't get the respect they deserve. They're good. They're good.
That's a team that brings structure to CIS in a different kind of way too. Like it's not even like they're good in the default CIS ways that you would think. They kind of are, and then they also have their own like extra style to that, which is a really refreshing sight, not just for when they're in CIS competition, but also when they're bringing stuff. And maybe some teams that back when we had LANs and the majors and all that, those fabled things, we had those teams that would go up against CIS teams, and they'd always say like, yeah, CIS teams, they can just like randomly deagle you in the head. They can just like randomly get all these rounds. They can do all this stuff. Like it doesn't really feel like you can even plan for it. And that's one thing. You can set that to one side. Obviously now to some extent, it feels like every team can do that. But when it comes to the CIS teams, if you're already writing them off as just another CIS team, that's one more advantage in Gambit's pocket. Of course, as they play more tier 1 events, that's going to happen less and less. But I think that's probably one of the reasons why they were able to have such an impressive showing at the last couple tier 1 events that they were at, is maybe people thought, oh, it's another Spirit or another, even like to some extent like VP or Namiga or something. You know, it's another really aggressive team that's going to play on unorthodox manner. So if we expect the unexpected and we play our game and we hit our shots, we'll be fine. But then like Gambit has their own game plan that people just don't expect from them. So honestly, I don't know if you guys can remember this. Back like a year ago, Gambit was like exiting CS, and then they were like, oh, we're signing an academy team. We're moving our academy team up to our main roster. Like what happened? Yeah. What is going on?
Yeah, that was really weird. I remember, I think it was at like Copenhagen Games 2018 was the first time I saw, I think they were Gambit youngsters at the time.
Yes.
And like, so they've been Gambit youngsters for a long time. And then randomly it was just like, all right, you're Gambit now. You did it, guys.
Made it. Started
Very
from
weird.
the bottom.
Very weird. I think Gambit's a team that I think can do well. Spirit is like, to me, prototypical CIS. Yes. Like they've got a few flashes and they shoot back. Like I don't know. I don't think Spirit is gonna go do too well. I think they've got some good pieces. You know, it's Bit that's on that team, right? Or is it?
Chopper
it's Mir.
is IGLing.
Right?
Yeah, Mir's their star player.
Yeah. They've got Mir. And then when I look at Gambit, I think Gambit's an actual team that can actually do well. Spirit is very odd. I don't like Spirit. I'm not on the Spirit train.
Spirit is the NIP of CIS, is what I'm hearing. Just the prototypical team. Before we go, top Reddit moment of 2020. Do you guys have anything for this? I didn't write this in the list, but maybe nominations, maybe things that immediately come to mind. Obviously, recency bias says the whole Twistzz move, because Fu was talking about that earlier. But
yeah.
Anything that comes to mind is like, one of the most ridiculous narratives I've ever heard, and it's in the front page of Reddit.
How about you guys seen the Dust 2 Mirage mesh map?
Dude, what the fuck? Everything I hate in one image.
It's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's so
They just took the left side of Dust 2, like bottom left, and merged it with the top right of Mirage. Like with B on Mirage and then B on Dust 2 as the A. I don't know what the fuck was going on. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why have they done this? Is that still on the top front page? Probably.
I'm not sure. I'm looking at the top post on Reddit for 2020. It's all like really shitty nade lineups.
Well,
oh, great.
Surprising. Not really.
Here's how you flash Monster on Overpass the way everyone's done it since 2013.
It does kind of shock me how that kind of content takes some effort to record your POV and upload it, but why? Why is that still rising to the top? I don't know. Surely you could just look that up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, actually, sometimes the really basic lineups aren't actually shown when you Google them. Like, you really look for something really simple.
True.
And it's like, everyone's got like, here's how to throw a Mirage jungle smoke from the middle of mid. Like,
I remember literally looking up Mirage jungle smoke recently. I don't know why I was doing this. And yeah, like it doesn't come up. Like the standard lineups don't come up for a while. It's weird. On the Reddit narratives though, the one that I like just scrolling through found was the pros complaining about the 10 a.m. match one. There was some good takes in that thread. I remember there was pretty good takes.
Oh boy,
legendary!
I wake up at 2 a.m. every morning to go to walk 4 hours to school, guys. I'm sure
uphill in the snow.
That thread really was like people salty that pros could possibly complain about any. It's almost like all those like any Twitter post where someone's like, actually, in my opinion, I had a pretty solid 2020, and everyone's like, how dare you? You know that 2020 was a terrible year for millions of people, and it's like, man, I'm just trying to live my life here, man. Like, fuck.
That is a classic. I really don't understand the whole idea of somebody just posted in the chat. Vax sucks. Reaction to Crims was a good one. That was Findrix T. I actually missed most of that, but I saw what was in the Richard Lewis videos that came out after.
I saw the
fact.
Richard Lewis video going over it.
The reviews that when he got destroyed by that mentalist who was like, he seemed to be arguing in good faith, and like in the last line, he's like basically the Vax sucks equivalent of like, and this is why Alex Jones was right all along. It's like, what the fuck? How did that happen? You snuck that one by me, so that happened. There's a couple of good takes in there, but it's mostly like the shadowy cabal of Valve officialized people who are going out and saying, okay, you're this up and coming player. We got to have you be the up and coming player. So here are the cheats. Get them loaded, and here's how you're gonna come up, and you're gonna turn these ones on at this level, and these ones on at that level, and like they really overcomplicated stuff, man. I couldn't follow their fan fiction at all. I don't know about you,
dude. If you're gonna believe in a conspiracy theory, at least believe in like a cool one. That one's just like, come on, could do better than that.
Obviously, fake. Valve would never have people who care about CS that much. Get out of here. That's my take.
I think like the moment of the year for 2020, I guess, is the whole. I think it's got to be the MIBR chaos cheating situation.
Yes.
Like
there's
just so many things like stemming out from that, and the way that played out, and like the Reddit threads were always so entertaining, and like all the coverage was so good. It was very fun. It was good.
It was a community building moment.
Their coach got called out as well, didn't he? Their coach.
yes. Like, MCE was called out as a cheater because he was standing in.
Oh yeah. Oh, like, you know, by the numbers, there's like the sneakiest cunt. It's got to be Dead. To me, Dead is the sneakiest cunt shout, because he not only did he show a different round when he was trying to say he was innocent, but even on the round he showed he was cheating later in the round. Yes. Like, that was the worst defense of all fucking time, and he got away with it. He got away with it. So like community response, he got away with it. He didn't, but he kind of did, you know.
MIBR is a real, they are a real org. I can't believe it took them so long to drop that roster, man. That was crazy. But at least 2020 brought us that. And this new look MIBR is pretty cool, besides the stream sniping. But I guess every team does that. Like Fu says, every team's a cheater. It's all over. It's just out.
Every team at least thinks every other team cheats.
Yes.
Well, every team is like, we're not the cheaters, but we need to level the playing field. Like that's the problem with the mentality.
I think that was something that famously plagued like British CS back in the day. When they were saying like only nerds practice, and these kids are obviously cheating because they beat us. And I mean, I'm sure some of that stuff is present in like North American scene as well, but they just like, well, these guys obviously cheated because that's how they won, so we're gonna get back at them. It's like a similar mentality. Well, there you go. My prediction for 2021 is ESIC will come out with a report that says, surprisingly, everybody is acting ethically, and they're all cleared of all charges, and also coronavirus is solved. And here's one.
Okay. ESIC won't come out with the MDL match fixing ever in 2021. It's like, they're still going to be like, oh, we're a few weeks out.
That's a good one. I feel like with ESIC, the issue with the MDL stuff, to my knowledge, is that they're actually dealing with like police investigation. Like there's legal stuff going on, so that understandably slows it down. But they did also not give themselves a good look when they were like, this is a few weeks out, and then like silence. Also, we can't punish anybody from stream sniping because everybody's doing it, so stop doing that, please. Silence. Like, wow, not a good look. But I hope that 2021 is better for them because they are doing some good work, and you guys should give them your money. But I can't do that. My money's too. You
guys both saw the Godsent near ban.
Yes, that was pretty.
That is concerning.
Wait, the Godsent what?
Godsent almost got banned because they apparently. So you know how in the scoreboard you can see your ADR with grenades, like your utility damage,
right?
And somebody who is an expert in air quotes for ESIC was saying that this information for ADR with nades was gathered illicitly instead of it being an obvious way that you could just check the scoreboard. And I don't even know how they would track that they had that. Like maybe they were reviewing voice comms or something. But
it must have been a voice comm thing. Yeah. They heard it and they said they have to be stream sniping to know this information. So they almost got a 90-day stream sniping ban until they disputed, and they're like, you can see this in the fucking scoreboard.
We just hit tab, guys. That's like, it.
That's pretty bad. That's not a good thing.
No, that is not a good look. So we certainly hope that they do better in 2021, which seems like it will happen. If I'm going to be the optimistic one here, I'll say it'll probably happen. So thanks, Hawka, for spending so much time with us. We just cracked over 2 hours, so appreciate you trucking it out for us here. And I know it's getting late over there. Do you have any sort of final words or final shout outs or send offs here anything you're doing next? I mean, you referenced a video you're working on now. I don't know if you want to shout that out on your YouTube channel or anything like that, but the floor is yours, man.
Yeah, I guess just go check me out on YouTube. I'm trying to make videos because there's not much else to do right now. So yeah, that'll be it. Hopefully 2021's good. Hopefully we get lands back. Hopefully we get, just something back that is good, because this year hasn't been great. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you for having me.
Of course. What do you got?
Check out some Hawka videos. I got one last thing to mention. Dweg brought it up, and I want to. This is just so fucking funny.
Oh no!
Anyone remember Norbert complaining on Twitter that Havu was playing without respect and beat them in one of the matches in the close qualifier for Flashpoint 1 using 5 ops on CT side? That was top. That was the most pathetic moment of 2020. Like in a nutshell, it was like, dude, if you can't be 5 ops, it's not their fault. It's because you're fucking bad, man. Yep. Like, get it together. The worst take of 2020 was that.
That's almost like I don't remember if it was Xantara's or if it was just the Turkish fans, but there was some part where space soldiers got destroyed by auto snipers, and they were like, "You motherfuckers bringing out auto snipers against us? No respect, lost all respect." And it was just like an outrage, an outpour. So yeah, that seems to happen. Some people get very upset with weapon selection. I don't understand. Like, Havu was clearly just trying to cosplay as Fnatic for the graffiti.
They were down like 14-1 and they came back with 5 ops.
Well, I missed that part of the story. That is pretty pathetic, actually. How
do you lose that? I think it was like 13-2 or 14-2 or something, and they came back. You're like, unreal. It's just unreal. And after that, you would complain that they were 5-opping.
Yeah, they broke the gentleman's agreement that everybody has come to, so that the game can still be fair. Clearly, that's the only thing. I guess that'll wrap us up here, up in ELO heaven, looking down on you plebs. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching. And of course, if you want more VOO content, you can check out his latest video, which is a bunch of reasons why you suck at the game. And it's an excellent video there. So definitely learned a lot. Like I said in the comment section, something to the effect of, now I'm simple. So stay tuned for my frag movies. And I'll catch you guys later on. This has been ELO heaven. Goodbye.